Chapter 2171. In the inner hall, Nie Tian, Ming Jianyu, Zhuozhuo, and Sikong Xuanyi sat on two sides. Ming Jianyu and the others stared at Nie Tian with disbelief written all over their faces. This was because Nie Tian had just told them that he was going to the Burial Cloud mountain range alone. The Stormwind clan was already safe, and under Sikong Xuanyi's threat, Yin Buxiu had removed the Darkmoon demonic seal in Stormwind Xiaoxiao's body. As for Sakura and Jian Qingqi, they were slowly reconstructing their bodies, so there was no need for Nie Tian to worry. In the next 3 months, Nie Tian was going to the Burial Cloud mountain range alone to search for the spacetime crystal essence. Nie Tian, do you know what kind of place the Burial Cloud mountain range is? Zhuozhuo calmed down and looked at Nie Tian with a strange expression. I don't know. Nie Tian shook his head and smiled. I was just about to ask Master Zhuo. Zhuozhuo sighed. The Burial Cloud mountain range is one of the 10 most dangerous places in the abandoned land. Rumor has it that it was a battlefield left behind from the era of the sages. There are countless killing formations there, and less than 1 in 100 cultivators that enter can come out alive. Nie Tian, why do you want to go to such a dangerous place? Zhuozhuo looked at Nie Tian with sincere concern. He really didn't want Nie Tian to go to such a place. Saint Art, no, Nie Tian. Ming Jianyu couldn't help but be excited when he heard Zhuozhuo's words and almost called out the wrong name. He said nervously, You don't know anything about the abandoned land. You really can't go to such a dangerous place. With a faint smile, Nie Tian looked at Zhuozhuo and Ming Jianyu and said, Grandmaster Zhuo, Elder Ming, you should be well aware of my current situation. The person behind Anya Minjia and Guangwu Fengyan will definitely hunt me down at all costs. No matter where I am, I won't be safe. The Burial Cloud mountain range is a dangerous place, but it's much safer for me. Isn't that so? Well, Zhuozhuo and Ming Jianyu looked at each other and didn't know how to answer Nie Tian. From the look of it, Nie Tian's words made some sense. Everyone had heard about the game that the mysterious man had mentioned. At this moment, Nie Tian was indeed in a very dangerous situation. Nie Tian, what you said is not without reason. However, isn't it too dangerous for you to head to the Burial Cloud mountain range alone? I'm willing to go with you. What do you think? Sikong Xuanyi, who had been silent all this while, suddenly spoke up. Nie Tian already knew that Sikong Xuanyi would say that, so he smiled and said, Senior Sikong, I'll be very safe if you come with me. But if we do that, we will be violating the rules of the game. If we break the rules, will Anya Minjia and the people behind him still abide by the rules? Sikong Xuanyi was stunned and was at a loss for words. Of course he knew what the rules Nie Tian was talking about were. If he followed Nie Tian, it would indeed be against the rules of the game. The only rule that the mysterious man had set was that those who participated in the game couldn't be stronger than a late-stage paramount god. Furthermore, the mysterious man had emphasized that this was the only rule that both sides had to abide by. If Nie Tian's side broke the rules, then the other side wouldn't have to abide by the rules either. Nie Tian, are you sure that the other side will abide by the rules? Zhuozhuo asked, frowning. I'm sure, Nie Tian said with a faint smile, his eyes filled with determination. The mysterious man had said that the other side would abide by the rules, and Nie Tian trusted him. Zhuozhuo's expression changed, and she was at a loss for words. The atmosphere fell into silence. When do you plan to leave, Nie Tian? Ming Jianyu suddenly asked. He knew that Nie Tian had made up his mind, and there was nothing he could do to stop him. I'm leaving right now. With a faint smile, Nie Tian said, Elder Ming, I'll leave my most important people here. I'll leave their safety in your hands. All right. Ming Jianyu nodded. He didn't promise anything, but his eyes were filled with determination. The most important people Nie Tian was referring to were none other than Rui Qianyu and Nieyuro. This time, he would be alone. Other than Fat Cat, he wouldn't bring anyone else. He wasn't sure what dangers he would run into in the Burial Cloud Mountains, so he didn't want Rui Qianyu and Nieyuro to take risks with him. Even if he left them in the Ninefold, he still wouldn't feel at ease. Nie Tian believed that Rui Qianyu and Nieyuro would be safe under Ming Jianyu's protection. He didn't tell Ming Jianyu about Sikong Xuani because he didn't think that Sikong Xuani was a threat. After a while, Nie Tian returned to his room and told Rui Qianyu and the others to come out from the Ninefold. He then briefly explained his plans. "You're going to the Burial Cloud Mountains alone?" Rui Qianyu and Nieyuro exclaimed in surprise after hearing Nie Tian's words. "I've decided that it's safer for you to stay here." Nie Tian nodded. "Don't worry. I'll definitely return safely within 3 months. Rui Qianyu looked at Nie Tian and hesitated for a long time before finally nodding in agreement. "Big brother Nie Tian, you must come back as soon as possible." Nieyuro was like a little girl in front of Nie Tian, her eyes red. "Rower, don't worry. I'll be back very soon." Nie Tian nodded with a faint smile. He didn't mention anything about Ni jamming because he wasn't sure if he could find Ni jamming on this trip. If he promised Nieyuro something and couldn't keep it, it would only make her more disappointed. "Wait for me, Qianye." With these words, Nie Tian turned to Rainy Qianye and said, "Wait for me, Qianye." In order not to add to the sadness of parting, he leapt into the air and disappeared quickly. Rui Qianyu and Nieyuro looked in the direction Nie Tian left in for a long time before returning to their room. High up in the sky, Nie Tian's figure was extremely fast. In just a short while, he had already left Dark Night City behind. "Nie Tian, since you already knew that Sikong Xuani had ill intentions, why did you let him know that you're going to the Burial Cloud Mountains?" In the air, Fat Cat's voice resounded in Nie Tian's mind. The latter was very puzzled. "Sikong Xuani just risked his life to protect me. If I went somewhere and didn't let him know, wouldn't that make him suspicious?" Nie Tian smiled. "Moreover, the current Sikong Xuani won't be a threat to me. So what if he knows that I'm going to the Burial Cloud Mountains?" Fat Cat thought for a moment and felt that Nie Tian's words made sense. She couldn't help but nod with a smile. "You seem to have become a lot smarter." "I've never been stupid." Nie Tian smiled. The wings on his back flapped and he sped up. Chapter 2172. So soon. Nie Tian looked at the black-clothed figures in front of him without any fear. Instead, he had a mocking look on his face. There was no doubt that these black-clothed men were his pursuers. Nie Tian was not surprised by the appearance of these black-clothed men. He could guess that the entire Dark Night City had been surrounded when this game of hunting and killing started. No matter which direction he tried to leave in, he would be discovered and stopped. However, he believed that these black-clothed assassins weren't too strong. After all, he had left Dark Night City without stopping. The other party didn't have much time to prepare, so it was impossible for them to mobilize too many powerful warriors. Very good, they really followed the rules of the game. Nie Tian looked at the black-clothed warriors in front of him and scanned them with his divine sense. He smiled faintly. Most of these black-clothed warriors were mid-stage paramount gods. Only a few were late-stage paramount gods. No peak paramount god showed up. This undoubtedly meant that the person hiding in the shadows had accepted the mysterious man's game and was pursuing Nie Tian according to the rules of the game. With Nie Tian's current strength, his strongest battle prowess was enough to contend with some weaker peak paramount gods. As for late-stage paramount gods, unless they were monstrous geniuses like Yin Xie, who could pose a threat to him, he didn't care about ordinary late-stage paramount gods. Nie Tian, the game has just started. The other party isn't too prepared. Don't waste time on these small fries. Just shake them off, Fat Cat reminded Nie Tian. "I know." Nie Tian nodded with a smile. He didn't want to waste time anyway. "Brat, your path has come to an end." At this time, the black-clothed warriors came to Nie Tian's side. One of them smiled coldly and said with a dark look in his eyes, Clearly, they didn't know who Nyetian was, so they didn't know Nyetian's battle prowess. They were probably still thinking, is there a need to mobilize so many overgod fighters for a mere peak overgod trash? Do you think a group of small fries like you can stop me? Nyetian smiled faintly. Starlight Heaven Slash appeared in his hand. His eyes were cold and gloomy like killing intent. Even a piece of trash with the strength of a lord dares to be so arrogant? One of the black-robed cultivators seemed eager to gain some merit. He roared angrily and moved, sending a punch straight at Nyetian. Courting death. The corner of Nyetian's mouth twitched. He didn't even look at that person and directly stabbed out with his sword. The sharp sword intent turned into a terrifying sword shadow and whistled out. Bang! The sword image was very sharp. After a dull sound, that black-clad cultivator flew back before he could figure out what was going on. His figure exploded in the air, turning into a scarlet light and disappearing. When the other black-clad cultivators saw this, their eyes widened, as if they couldn't believe what they were seeing. A peak overgod had killed a mid-overgod with a casual swing of his sword. Was that even possible? Are you doubting your life now? I haven't even started yet. Nyetian looked at the stunned black-clad cultivators and smiled cold, his eyes filled with killing intent. He was currently a peak overgod, and his way of the sword had reached the elementary level of sword and martial arts as one. Even without using a forbidden skill, he could easily deal with a mid-overgod, and even a weaker late overgod couldn't take a single blow from him. This kid's strength is strange. Everyone, be careful. At this moment, one of the black-clad cultivators finally reacted and shouted a warning to his companions. The other black-clad cultivators were shocked. They hesitated, not daring to make a move. Since you don't dare to make a move, I'll be leaving. Nyetian smiled faintly. He didn't want to waste any more time. The wings on his back shook, and his body moved like a sword as he sped away. A bunch of trash. Stop him! One of the black-clad cultivators roared when he saw this. His figure moved, and he charged at Nyetian. Do you want to die? When Nyetian sensed a violent aura behind him, he suddenly slowed down. When the person behind him was very close, he suddenly turned around, and his eyes trembled. Immediately, a terrifying spiritual pressure appeared and enveloped that person. The black-clad cultivator was only a few meters away from Nyetian. Caught off guard, his mind shook, and then his expression became blank. He immediately lost control of his body and fell straight down. When the others saw this, they had no idea what was going on. They could only watch as their companion fell to his death. What's going on? When the group of black-clad cultivators saw Nyetian kill someone with a glare, they were extremely horrified. Their backs were covered in cold sweat. This time, no one dared to chase after Nyetian. They could only watch him leave. Nyetian moved like lightning. In the blink of an eye, he was already several tens of thousands of meters away. Following that, he continued flying for a while. After confirming that there was no one following him, he slowed down. After shaking off these people, Nyetian felt much more at ease. At the very least, he would be much calmer for the rest of the journey. He had already seen the map earlier. The Burial Cloud mountain range was close to 50,000 kilometers away from Dark Knight City. The Forsaken Land was constructed from a fragment of the Holy World. Spacetime was extremely stable, so there were no spacetime scrolls that could travel through spacetime. If Nyetian wanted to go to the Burial Cloud mountain range, he could only fly there slowly. If he relied on his own strength to fly there, it would probably take him 10 days. Furthermore, during these 10 days, he would have to fly day and night. By the time he reached the Burial Cloud mountain range, he would probably be completely exhausted. This stupid method was a waste of time and energy, but it was relatively safe. Apart from this method, there was another method, which was to find a city and then ride a flying mount with other people to the Burial Cloud mountain range. This method was very fast. If everything went smoothly, he could reach the Burial Cloud mountain range in a day or two. However, if that was the case, Nye Tian would be with a lot of people. It would be very easy for his tracks to be exposed, so it would be even more dangerous. After thinking for a very long time, Nye Tian made a decision. He would fly by himself first. If he could encounter a flying mount along the way, that would be for the best. If not, he would just fly there slowly. He could afford to waste 10 days. For the next 3 days, Nye Tian flew by himself. He paid attention to maintaining his martial body, so he did not fly quickly. Along the way, he encountered many flying mounts. However, they were not heading to the Burial Cloud mountain range. At this moment, Nye Tian was flying at a moderate speed. He was very calm. He was not in a hurry. Whoa! At this moment, a sharp cry suddenly rang out high up in the sky. It seemed to be some sort of bird. Nye Tian suddenly raised his head and saw a black shadow fly past. It was extremely fast, like a black bolt of lightning, disappearing in the blink of an eye. What speed! Nye Tian sighed in surprise. He looked back at the astral soul wings on his back, and could not help but laugh bitterly. He said in a self-deprecating manner, "Compared to that, my speed is like a snail." Chapter 2173. Nye Tian raised his head and his expression stiffened when he saw the black shadow not far away. At that moment, a strange-looking black bird appeared in front of him. The black bird's body wasn't big, and its wingspan was only 3 to 4 meters. Its black feathers were fluffy and messy, without any luster. Moreover, there were patches of bald patches, as if someone had plucked its feathers. The strangest thing was that the black bird had 2 heads. Furthermore, its 2 heads did not look like a bird's, but more like a beast's or even a dragon's. Nye Tian was stunned for a few seconds before he finally reacted and asked with a speechless expression, "This is the black shadow from just now?" A black shadow had flashed past his eyes at a speed faster than the blink of an eye, but he did not expect it to be such a strange bird. Judging from its appearance, the black bird was inferior to the first-rank spirit beasts in the 3,000 small world. Who would have thought that such a strange bird would have such a shocking speed? There were all kinds of birds in a big forest. At this moment, the black bird's 2 heads were staring at Nye Tian with a confused look on its face. Nye Tian took a deep breath and calmed himself down. He suddenly realized that the bird did not seem to have a master. Why don't I capture this strange bird and let it bring me to the Burial Cloud Mountains? Nye Tian's eyes flickered with an unconcealable passion. He had just witnessed the strange bird's speed. If he could tame it, it would be much easier for him to go to the Burial Cloud Mountains. "Blackie, Blackie, peck him!" However, a young voice was suddenly heard. "Who's there?" Nye Tian was startled and screamed, "Whoa!" However, in the next moment, the strange bird let out a shrill cry, and its body blurred as it charged towards Nye Tian like a bolt of black lightning. Before Nye Tian could react, he felt a sharp pain on his arm. He lowered his head and saw 2 bloody holes on his arm. It was obvious that he had been pecked by the bird. "What's going on?" Nye Tian frowned and growled. This small injury was nothing to him, but to be bitten by a strange bird for no reason, he was naturally unhappy. "Big black, little black, peck him again." Immediately after, the tender voice sounded again. "Pooh! Puff!" Similarly, Nye Tian didn't react at all, and 2 more bloody holes appeared on his arm. "Big black, little black, peck him again." Once again, the tender voice rang out. Again. Nye Tian frowned. He really couldn't take it anymore. His entire body lit up with a layer of purple thunder battle armor. Bang! Bang! In the next moment, 2 muffled sounds suddenly rang out. The strange bird's beaks had actually sunk into the purple heaven lightning armor, and could not be pulled out. "Behave yourself." Upon seeing this, Nye Tian let out a calm smile and reached out his hand. A stream of sword intent gushed out and transformed into a sword net, trapping the strange bird. "You on the bird, come out." Nie Tian withdrew the thunder armor and said with a smirk. Just now, Nie Tian had heard a childish voice giving orders to the blackbird, which he had heard very clearly. What are you trying to do? At that instant, a figure in gray walked out. It was a boy around the age of 7 or 8. He stared at Nie Tian in fear. Nie Tian frowned when he saw that it was a child. He loosened his grip and withdrew the sword net, saying, "Leave." He did not expect the person to be a child. He did not have the heart to make things difficult for the boy, thus he let him go. "You're letting me go?" The boy was startled, as if he couldn't believe what he had just heard. Nie Tian nodded and let out a wry smile. He thought to himself, "You're just a kid, do you think I'll kill you?" The boy did not leave. He stared at Nie Tian for a long time with a troubled expression, before he suddenly said, "Where are you going? Let me give you a ride." Nie Tian let out a smile and said, "Kid, are you sure you want to give me a ride? Aren't you afraid that I'm a bad guy?" "You're a good guy." The boy suddenly let out a smile. His eyes flickered as he nodded and said, "If you were a bad guy, you would have killed me earlier. Kid, you're pretty smart." Nie Tian let out a calm smile. He pondered for a moment before he stepped onto the strange bird's back and said, "I'm going to the Burial Cloud Mountains." "Burial Cloud Mountains, I'm going there too!" The boy exclaimed in joy when he heard the name. Nie Tian was overjoyed too, as he did not expect to be going the same way as the boy. Blackie, let's go." The boy was rather excited. Under his command, the strange black bird turned into a streak of black lightning and advanced towards the Burial Cloud Mountains. Along the way, Nie Tian asked the boy many things, but the latter was unwilling to say much. He only said that he was called Mu Chun and that he was going to the Burial Cloud Mountains to find his elder brother. Although the strange black bird's appearance was unprepossessing, its speed was truly astoundingly fast. In just half a day's time, Nie Tian and Lin Chen arrived at the periphery of the Burial Cloud Mountains. "Big brother Nie Tian, this is the Burial Cloud Mountains? So big." Lin Chen looked at the endless mountain ranges below, his little face very shocked. But at this moment, Nie Tian looked at the Burial Cloud Mountains. His expression froze, as if he discovered something. "Big brother Nie Tian, what's wrong?" Lin Chen lifted his head and looked at Nie Tian, asking with a puzzled look. Nie Tian's brows furrowed. Activating the holographic divine vestige, he spread out his divine sense, carefully searching the air. At this time, he indeed made a major discovery. Just in that instant earlier, he suddenly sensed a very familiar aura, Dragon Chi. This Dragon Chi, Nie Tian was all too familiar. It was precisely Di Shi's aura. It's indeed Big Brother Di Shi's aura. Could it be that he's here? Nie Tian sucked in a deep breath and secretly said in his heart. Although that Dragon Chi that he sensed was very weak and seemed to be slowly dissipating, he was very certain that this was Di Shi's aura. According to Nyeyuro, when she entered the Forsaken Land with Ni Jianming and Di Shi, they were separated. Hence, Di Shi appearing here was not considered strange either. Nie Tian believed that Di Shi was either at the Burial Cloud Mountains, or he had come to the Burial Cloud Mountains before. "Big brother Nie Tian, you sense the Dragon Chi, right?" At this time, Lin Chen saw that Nie Tian did not speak and suddenly said, "N." When Nie Tian heard Lin Chen's words, his gaze involuntarily narrowed, and he said in astonishment, "Lin Chen, you also sense the Dragon Chi?" Di Shi's Dragon Chi was very weak. Nie Tian could only clearly sense this Dragon Chi after activating the holographic divine vestige. But Lin Chen was a 7 or 8-year-old child. His primordial spirit had not even awakened yet. How could he possibly sense the Dragon Chi? I sensed it. Lin Chen saw Nie Tian's look of surprise and was actually very happy. He said with a proud look, "Big brother Nie Tian, this seems to be the Dragon Chi of a golden giant dragon. The aura is so strong. It must be a very, very big golden giant dragon." Lin Chen's voice was not loud, but every sentence that fell into Nie Tian's ears was like a thunderclap. Lin Chen not only sensed the dragon chi, but he could also distinguish that this was the dragon chi of a golden giant dragon. Chapter 2174. Nie Tian's brows furrowed, his expression slowly becoming strange. Lin Chen's words made him too surprised. A child who had not even awakened his primordial spirit could actually sense the weak dragon chi in the air so acutely, and even be able to determine that the dragon chi originated from a massive golden dragon. This was seriously too strange. Actually, ever since the moment he met Lin Chen, Nie Tian had a great curiosity about the latter. A 6- or 7-year-old child riding a two-headed strange bird alone, heading to one of the 10 great danger lands, Burial Cloud Mountain Range, to find his elder brother. This in itself was very strange. Hence, at the first moment, Nie Tian made Lin Chen leave, not wishing to have too much contact with him. It was just that Lin Chen took the initiative to offer to send Nie Tian off, that was why the latter did not refuse. But now, Lin Chen's performance made Nie Tian even more curious, the doubts in his heart becoming even heavier. Wow! At this time, Lin Chen did not notice the change in Nie Tian's expression. Instead, he exclaimed in amazement, "This dragon chi is so powerful! This golden dragon's body must exceed 3,000 meters." Nie Tian's gaze sharpened slightly, his expression much calmer. Looking at Lin Chen, he asked directly, "Lin Chen, how can you sense the dragon chi?" "I can just sense it." Lin Chen's pair of eyes flickered, a naive look on his face. Nie Tian was even more curious in his heart. He could tell that Lin Chen's current expression was absolutely not fake. Just who was this Lin Chen? Intuition told Nie Tian that Lin Chen's identity was definitely not simple. "Big brother Nie Tian, are you alright?" Lin Chen lifted his head to look at Nie Tian, asking with a strange look in his eyes. "I'm fine." Nie Tian shook his head. Divine sense swept over Lin Chen's body, and suddenly discovered that the latter's essence meridians were somewhat strange. His expression involuntarily changed. He had seen before many strange essence meridians, such as dragon meridians, meridian of 3 lives, as well as various kinds of essence meridians that possessed bloodline power. However, Lin Chen's Yuan meridian completely exceeded Nie Tian's understanding. It was different from anyone else's Yuan meridian. A normal martial artist would possess 9 elemental meridians. Depending on the martial artist's talent, the form of the 9 elemental meridians would be slightly different. But within Lin Chen's body, there was actually only one essence meridian. Nie Tian was very certain that Lin Chen did not only awaken one essence meridian, but he only had one essence meridian. How is this possible? In the next moment, Nie Tian was stunned, and he couldn't conceal the shock on his face. Then, he forced himself to calm down and carefully felt Lin Chen's Yuan meridian. He made an even more important discovery. It was as if Lin Chen did not only have 1 Yuan meridian, but 9 Yuan meridians. However, under the influence of some kind of power, these 9 Yuan meridians had fused together to form 1 Yuan meridian. This discovery made Nie Tian quite shocked, and his brows furrowed even more tightly. He had never imagined that there would be a martial artist in this world with such a strange Yuan meridian. 9 into 1. Just at this moment, within Nie Tian's divine sense, Fat Cat's voice rang out, and it was obviously very surprised. "Fat, what did you say?" Nie Tian was a little nervous just now, and did not hear Fat Cat's words clearly. Now that he saw the latter's shocked expression, he could not help but ask. 9 into 1, it really is 9 into 1. I really did not expect that this little fellow is actually a martial artist with 9 into 1. Fat Cat did not seem to hear Nie Tian's question, and said with great surprise. In the end, his expression became lifeless. 9 into 1? What is 9 into 1? Nie Tian had a puzzled look, and he completely did not know what Fat Cat was talking about. He had never heard of 9 into 1, and did not even know what 9 into 1 meant. But Fat Cat was in a huge state of shock, and obviously did not have time to bother with Nyetian. Big brother Nyetian, did you notice that my Yuan meridian is different from others? At this moment, Lin Chen looked at Nyetian, already knowing what the latter was thinking, and asked helplessly with a small face. Nyetian nodded and frowned. Lin Chen, why do you only have 1 Yuan meridian? I also don't know, the people in the family said that I was born with wasted Yuan meridian. Lin Chen's face was sad, and he could not help but lower his head as he spoke. Wasted Yuan meridian? At this moment, Fat Cat suddenly let out a strange cry, as if he had heard a huge joke, and shouted, "If 9 into 1 Yuan meridian is a wasted Yuan meridian, then all the martial artists in this world are all useless." Nyetian heard Fat Cat's words and couldn't help but frown and asked, "Fat, what did you mean by 9 into 1 just now?" Fat Cat was much calmer now and laughed, but asked in reply, "Nyetian, do you know why martial artists have 9 Yuan meridian?" Nyetian was stunned, and did not really understand Fat Cat's words. It has always been like this for martial artists to awaken 9 Yuan meridian. Why would there be a why? Actually, martial artists have 9 Yuan meridian, and the reason is very simple. It is because there are 9 major elements in the world, and each Yuan meridian corresponds to 1 element. Fat Cat smiled faintly, as if he was very happy. Nyetian's face changed and said, "It can't be like that. If a martial artist's 9 Yuan meridian corresponds to the 9 elements of the world, then doesn't that mean that all martial artists should have 9 elements? But under normal circumstances, martial artists only have 1 element, and martial artists with 2 elements are very rare. The 9 elements of the world: metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, thunder, light, and darkness. If it was really as Fat Cat said, then didn't that mean that all martial artists had 9 elements at the same time? But the truth was that every martial artist only had 1 element. Nyetian, don't be anxious, I haven't finished. Fat Cat already knew that Nyetian would ask this, and laughed, and continued. A martial artist's 9 Yuan meridian does indeed correspond to the 9 elements of the world. But under normal circumstances, a martial artist's Yuan meridian is awakened 1 at a time. The first Yuan meridian to awaken is usually the dominant one, and the subsequent Yuan meridian will be assimilated by the first Yuan meridian, and they will have the same element. Therefore, most martial artists are martial artists with only 1 element. A small number of martial artists, under special circumstances, can have more than 1 element. Hearing Fat Cat's words, Nyetian's eyes trembled, and he immediately understood. Fat Cat's meaning was very simple. A martial artist's element was actually determined by the first Yuan meridian awakened. If a martial artist's first awakened Yuan meridian corresponded to the wind element, then the subsequent Yuan meridian would be affected by the first Yuan meridian, and could only have the wind element. Then, this martial artist's element would be the wind element. Fat, even if a martial artist's 9 Yuan meridian corresponds to the 9 elements of the world, what does this have to do with Lin Chen? Nyetian frowned and continued to ask. As I said just now, under normal circumstances, a martial artist's Yuan meridians are awakened 1 by 1. That's why most martial artists only have a single attribute. Little Fat Cat chuckled with a strange look in its eyes. He looked at Lin Chen and said, "But this little guy is not an ordinary martial artist, he is a martial artist with 9 elements in 1. Therefore, his 9 Yuan meridian awakened at the same time." Chapter 2175. Nyetian stared at Lin Chen with an expression of extreme shock, unable to speak for a long time. Fat Cat said that Lin Chen was a 9 elements unite as 1 martial artist, and the 9 meridians in his body were awakened at the same time. 9 elemental meridians awakened at the same time. After a long time, Nyetian's eyes trembled, and he said in his heart, "Is this possible?" Everyone he had seen before had their strength increase bit by bit. 9 elemental meridians awakened at the same time. Didn't that mean that this person did not go through the 1st to the 8th level of elemental meridians, but directly reached the 9th level? In Nie Tian's eyes, this was simply impossible. Nie Tian, don't doubt my words. 9 elemental meridians awakened at the same time. This is the greatest characteristic of a 9 elements unite as one martial artist. Fat Cat laughed, appearing very proud, and said, I also didn't expect that a 9 elements unite as one martial artist actually exists. Fat, what's the difference between a 9 elements unite as one martial artist and a normal martial artist? After a while, Nie Tian became a little cold, and couldn't help but ask. Of course there's a difference. Fat Cat smiled in surprise and said, A 9 elements unite as one martial artist, after the 9 elemental meridians awaken, will gradually merge into one, and form a 9 elements meridian. This 9 elements meridian has 9 attributes at the same time. This. Nie Tian was taken aback, and his expression froze again. 9 elements meridian, 9 attributes. This statement was too shocking, and Nie Tian couldn't accept it. Nie Tian had seen many dual attribute martial artists, and even 5 elements martial artists, but a 9 elements martial artist was something he had never thought of. Nie Yuro was a dual attribute martial artist, and her strength far surpassed other martial artists of the same level. Mizuhara Xiang was a 5 elements martial artist, and her battle strength could be said to be abnormal, which was why she was known as the #1 genius of the 9 ancient clans. And now, Lin Chun actually had a 9 elements martial artist. How could this not shock Nie Tian? Once a 9 elements martial artist grew up, it was hard to imagine how terrifying it would be. No wonder Fat Cat was so surprised when she found out that Lin Chun was a 9 elements 1 martial artist. Fatty, I think Lin Chen's Yuan meridians should have been awakened for a long time, but he still hasn't reached the origin spirit stage. What's going on? Next, Nie Tian took a deep breath, and his shocked expression eased up a lot. When the Fat Cat heard Nie Tian's question, her tone turned serious as she said, Observe the little fellow's 9 elemental meridians carefully. Nie Tian furrowed his brows. He activated the holographic divine runes and used his divine sense to sense Lin Chen's 9 elemental meridians. He immediately discovered that something was wrong. Lin Chen's 9 elemental meridians were actually enveloped by some sort of powerful seal. It's the 9 Yuan divine seal. The Fat Cat's voice rang out, saying, This is a powerful seal that comes naturally with the 9 elemental meridians. If this seal cannot be broken, the martial practitioner who fuses the 9 elemental meridians into one will forever remain in the elemental meridians realm, unable to awaken their origin spirit. This. Nie Tian was stunned, and didn't know what to say. Martial practitioners who fused the 9 elemental meridians into one were naturally talented and heaven-defying. However, the 9 Yuan divine seal that came with it was obviously not an ordinary seal, and greatly restricted martial practitioners who fused the 9 elemental meridians into one. I estimate that this little fellow's 9 elemental meridians have already been awakened for more than 2 years. If he still can't open the 9 Yuan divine seal after a period of time, his 9 elemental meridians' potential will dry up. At that time, even if he opens the 9 Yuan divine seal again, he won't be able to awaken his origin spirit. At this time, the Fat Cat sighed and said with great regret. Nie Tian looked at Lin Chen, and his expression couldn't help but stiffen. Lin Chen was only 6 or 7 years old, and his potential was limitless. However, because he was a martial practitioner who fused the 9 elemental meridians into one, and possessed 9 elemental meridians in his body, he was said to have naturally useless meridians. It was really too much of a pity. Fat, do you know how to open the 9 Yuan divine seal? After hesitating for a while, Nie Tian couldn't help but ask. He had many things to do now, but facing such a talented child, he really couldn't bear to ignore him. I don't know. The Fat Cat shook his head. He was also thinking about this question. Nie Tian's face darkened, and his gaze swept over Lin Chun, full of pity. Fat, is it because of his 9 yuan divine meridians that Lin Chun can sense the dragon chi? At this time, Nie Tian suddenly thought of this, and couldn't help but ask. No. Unexpectedly, the fat cat shook his head and said with a wry smile, Nie Tian, take a closer look. What does this little fellow's 9 yuan divine meridians look like? Huh! Nie Tian was stunned for a moment, then he used his divine sense to check, and his whole body stiffened again. Lin Chen's 9 yuan divine meridians were in the shape of a dragon. Dragon meridians. In the next moment, Nie Tian reacted and exclaimed in his heart. He was too shocked just now, and didn't pay attention to the overall shape of the 9 yuan divine meridians. Now that he looked again, he actually discovered that the 9 yuan divine meridians were in the shape of a dragon. Without a doubt, Lin Chen's yuan divine meridians were not only 9 yuan divine meridians, but also dragon meridians. Dragon meridians. Lin Chen's yuan divine meridians are dragon meridians. Could it be that he's from the guardian family? Nie Tian exclaimed in his heart, and the way he looked at Lin Chen changed. At this moment Lin Chen raised his head, and a pair of clear eyes stared at Nie Tian and said, Brother Nie Tian, what's wrong? Do you also think that I'm a good-for-nothing? Nie Tian reacted in shock, and shook his head repeatedly, and said excitedly, Lin Chen, how are you a good-for-nothing? You're a genius, a super genius. Lin Chen's little face stiffened, as if he was frightened by Nie Tian. Nie Tian finally understood why Lin Chen could so keenly sense the dragon chi. It was because he had 9 yuan divine meridians, and it was dragon meridians. Big brother Nie Tian, you're the genius. At this time Lin Chen suddenly said, Your dragon meridians are so powerful. It's the strongest dragon meridians I've ever seen. Even my big brother's dragon meridians aren't as strong as yours. When Nie Tian heard Lin Chen's words, his expression involuntarily changed, and he was even more convinced in his heart that the latter was from the guardian family clan. Lin Chen's words revealed that there were many people who possessed dragon meridians around him. Dragon meridians were precisely the characteristics of the guardian family clan. At this time, Nie Tian suddenly reacted. Previously, Lin Chen left and returned was probably because he discovered that he had a dragon meridians in his body. Following that, Nie Tian did not question Lin Chen too much, but asked, Lin Chen, you came to Burial Cloud Mountain Range to find your big brother. Do you know where he is? When Lin Chen heard Nie Tian ask about big brother, his little face suddenly became sad, as if he was about to cry. He said, I heard from Grandpa Patriarch that Big Brother and the rest went to Thousand Devil Cave. It's already been 3 months. Grandpa Patriarch told me that Big Brother and the rest won't return. The clansmen also said that Big Brother and the rest are already dead. I don't believe that Big Brother is dead. I know that Big Brother is definitely still alive. As he spoke, Lin Chen finally could not hold it in anymore and began to cry softly. He was only a 6 or 7-year-old child. The things in his heart were naturally simple. Lin Chen, don't cry. You're a boy, you can't cry so casually. Nie Tian comforted Lin Chen and said in his heart, Thousand Devil Cave, what a coincidence. According to Lin Chen, his big brother should have entered Thousand Devil Cave with the clansmen to do something. But regrettably, they did not come out of Thousand Devil Cave. Chapter 2176. Lin Chen, I'm going to the Thousand Demons Cave next as well. Let's go together. Nie Tian smiled faintly after Lin Chen had calmed down. Yes, Lin Chen nodded firmly. He really wanted to go with Nie Tian, but he was too embarrassed to say it out loud. Nie Tian guessed that Lin Chen must have come out behind his clan's back. It was just too dangerous for a boy to come to the Burial Cloud Mountains alone. It could be considered fate that Nie Tian and Lin Chen had met. He would obviously help Lin Chen if he could. At the very least, Lin Chen would be much safer by his side. Afterwards, the two of them descended from the sky and landed on an empty patch of land in the mountain range. Lin Chen took out his soul pet pouch and stowed the strange bird away. Afterwards, he looked at Nie Tian happily and said, "Brother Nie Tian, let's go." Nie Tian was very curious. Just what kind of divine beast was the strange black bird? It was actually so fast. However, after some thought, he did not ask too much. Before, Nie Tian had already engraved the entire outline of the Burial Cloud Mountains into a projection and stored it in his soul, so he was extremely familiar with the entire place. They were currently rather far away from the Thousand Demons Cave. However, because the Thousand Demons Cave was in the depths of the Burial Cloud Mountains, Nie Tian could only enter through the mountains. Nie Tian was extremely careful as he entered the mountains. He kept the divine glyph on at all times, so he could clearly sense everything within 10,000 meters. This was the first time he had come to the Burial Cloud Mountains, so he had no idea what kind of danger he would encounter. Along the way, a few cultivators would appear from time to time. They were all very powerful. Most of them were overgods, and there were even quite a few peak overgods. The Burial Cloud Mountains was one of the 10 great danger zones of the abandoned land. Without a certain level of strength, no one dared to come here. The people that Nie Tian and Lin Chen encountered would usually glance at them a few more times. Most of them were filled with disdain. Indeed, a peak overgod and a child of 6 or 7 had appeared in the Burial Cloud Mountains. It was rather laughable. At this time, Nie Tian suddenly realized that a lot of people were rushing forward, as if something had happened. Is there something up ahead? Nie Tian was puzzled, but after thinking about it, he decided not to go over. He prepared to immediately head for Thousand Devil Cave, not wishing to waste time in other places. However, at this moment, his expression suddenly changed. He actually felt a violent aura madly rushing towards him from behind. Nie Tian instantly reacted. A pair of astral soul wings appeared on his back, and with a flicker of his silhouette, he brought Lin Chen along as he soared thousands of meters into the air. Boom! Almost at the same time that his figure moved to the side, a terrifying palm shadow landed with a loud rumble, and a huge pit with a radius of several kilometers appeared on the ground. Nie Tian's figure froze in midair as he looked at the deep pit on the ground. His face couldn't help but sink. Fortunately, he reacted quickly. Otherwise, he would have been hit by this sudden palm. A piece of trash with only the power of a sovereign, but his reaction is quite fast. In the next moment, a cold, disdainful voice rang out. Afterwards, a black-clothed figure shot out, rushing forward madly. That palm strike just now was from this black-clothed martial artist. Nie Tian frowned, and he stared at the cultivator coldly. "What are you looking at, you piece of trash?" The cultivator sensed Nie Tian's hostility, but he was not afraid at all. Instead, he sneered. A piece of trash with the power of an overgod actually dares to come to the Burial Cloud Mountains. Are you tired of living? King blocked my path just now. That palm strike of mine was just a warning. The black-clothed martial artist was extremely arrogant as he looked at Nie Tian with contempt. Obviously, he regarded the latter as a soft persimmon that could be easily crushed. Boss's reminder is really overbearing. If that silver-haired brat had reacted any slower, I'm afraid he would have died from this palm strike. At this time, another black-clothed cultivator appeared and chuckled as he spoke to the person in front of him. A piece of trash like him won't last more than half a day in the Burial Cloud Mountains. It's his honor to die to my palm strike. The first cultivator smiled cold. The first black-clothed cultivator smiled coldly, as if he did not want to waste any more time on Nie Tian. He turned to the black-clothed man beside him and said, "Second bro, let's go. There's no need to waste time on trash." With that, the two of them turned around and prepared to leave. Wait! However, at this moment, a cold, murderous voice rang out. It was Nie Tian. The leader was surprised. He turned around and looked at Nyetian. He snickered. Brat, what do you want? Did I say you could leave? The corner of Nyetian's lips twitched, and his gaze was dark and cold. Sensing the coldness in Nyetian's eyes, the black-clothed boss couldn't help but be taken aback. He seemed to be a little nervous, but he quickly calmed down and roared, Brat, do you know who you're talking to? I think you're really tired of living. Boss, I think this brat is probably an idiot. Let's just kill him. The second brother smiled cold and said coldly, Swoosh, swoosh. Just as the two men in black finished speaking, there were suddenly two air-piercing sounds in the air. Before the two of them realized what was going on, there was a glaring sword mark on each of their faces. Half of their faces instantly became a bloody mess. The two men in black were stunned. They looked at each other and immediately reacted. They roared at the same time, Brat, you're courting, swoosh, swoosh. However, before they could finish the word die, another two sword shadows appeared. There was another sword mark on the other side of their faces. You! The eyes of the two men in black shook violently. The way they looked at Nyetian was instantly filled with shock and fear. At this moment, the two of them no longer had the arrogance they had before. Instead, it was replaced by unconcealable fear. They had no idea how Nyetian was able to leave sword marks on their faces in the blink of an eye. They were early-stage paramount gods, while Nyetian was only a peek-over god. However, they didn't know that their strength was not even worth mentioning in front of Nyetian. If Nyetian wanted to kill them, they would already be two corpses. Let me ask you, why are you in such a hurry? Nyetian asked cold, staring at the two men in black. Although the two men were arrogant, Nyetian didn't want to kill them. He just wanted to know what was going on up ahead. He had already noticed that many people were running forward, so he was a little curious about what was going on up ahead. Lord. The black-clothed leader now knew how powerful Nyetian was. He swallowed hard and said in a trembling voice, There's an ancient divine beast in the Dragonclaw Valley up ahead. I want to go and see what's going on. An ancient divine beast? Nyetian frowned and his eyes slightly narrowed. Lord. The black-clothed leader's forehead was covered in sweat. He hurriedly said, It seems to be a Pishio. Chapter 2177. The first thing that came to Nyetian's mind when he heard the word Pishio was Bab. He had found Bab by accident in the 3000 Lesser World. Moreover, Bab had hatched from a frost snake egg, so it must have been a mutation. Bab had only been with Nyetian for a short time, so Nyetian had given it to Nyeyuro. Nyeyuro had not only been separated from Ni Janming and Dishi, but she had also been separated from Bab. The Pishio was a very rare divine beast, so Nyetian guessed that the Pishio in front of them might really be Bab. Get lost. Nyetian waved his hand, indicating that the two black-clad martial artists could leave. The two felt as if they had been pardoned. They wiped the cold sweat off their foreheads and turned to leave. Boom! Boom! However, at this moment, two enormous palm shadows appeared in the void, and the two black-clad martial artists didn't even have time to react before they were smashed to pieces. In the next moment, a dozen black-clad figures appeared and surrounded Nyetian. Huh! Nyetian frowned and his face darkened. These black-clad martial artists were obviously coming for him. They must be hunters. He hadn't expected that they would show up as soon as he arrived at the Burial Cloud Mountains. Wasn't this speed a little too fast? Nyetian's gaze swept over them, and he immediately sensed that they were all late-stage paramount gods, and their auras were very strong. Clearly, they were stronger than ordinary late-stage paramount gods. Big Brother Nyetian. Lin Chen looked up at Nyetian, and he couldn't help but feel nervous. Lin Chen, hide in here. Nyetian took out the 9 extremities and told Lin Chen to hide in it. It was going to be a fierce battle, and Lin Chen was in great danger. Lin Chen nodded and stepped into the 9 extremities. Kill! The black-clothed cultivators did not waste any time speaking nonsense. They only shouted the word kill in a deep voice. After that, more than 10 of them attacked at the same time. A surging aura appeared, like a raging wave, pressing down on Nyetian. Nyetian's eyes narrowed slightly. Without any hesitation, he activated the 3 forbidden technique. His aura skyrocketed and a sword aura soared into the sky. He was like a giant sword that stood between the heavens and the earth. This was the first time he had used the 3 forbidden techniques at the same time after reaching peak over God. His presence immediately reached its peak, and his strength skyrocketed as well. To his disappointment, he was still a late paramount god. In the past, Nyetian had been a late lord god, but with his 3 forbidden magics, he was now as strong as a late paramount god. Unfortunately, he was a peak godlord, and even with his 3 forbidden magics, he was still a late paramount god. It seemed that the further one progressed, the more limited the improvement of the 3 forbidden techniques became. Even still, Nyetian could sense that his energy was much stronger than before. Most importantly, his Tao of the sword had reached the level of the elementary level, and his battle prowess was now many times stronger than before. Rumble! The power of the sword soared into the sky and suddenly bloomed. It actually forcibly broke through the huge power in the surroundings, and a violent roar sounded in the void. Streams of power wreaked havoc in the air, causing heaven and earth to tremble violently. The trees and rocks on the ground were crushed by the power, transforming into turbid waves that surged out in all directions. Damnation! Facing more than a dozen late paramount gods at the same time put a lot of pressure on Nyetian. It was as if there was an enormous hand in the air that was slowly clenching and trying to crush him. He was single-handedly fighting more than a dozen late paramount gods at the same time. It was like he was fighting more than a dozen late paramount gods at the same time. It was a very disadvantageous situation for him. 12 heaven-slaying swords formation, activate. In the next moment, Nyetian's expression darkened, and the sword intent around him skyrocketed. 12 heaven-reaching sword pillars appeared, and in the blink of an eye, they merged into one, morphing into an enormous sword projection that blossomed in the air. Boom! 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 As the sword image bloomed, the power of the sword image surged out, and the dozen or so black-garbed cultivators were powerless to withstand it. Upon seeing this, Nyetian flapped his wings and shot up into the sky. Die! In the void below, a black-clothed martial artist reacted very quickly. His body moved like lightning, and a black saber appeared in his hand. He slashed out tyrannically, and a flaming saber wave whistled out, spreading in the air into a sea of raging flames that surged towards Nyetian. You're courting death. Nyetian's mouth twitched, and his expression darkened. He stabbed out with the starry heaven slash, his sword will condensing into a sword image that looked like a waterfall of light, burning with terrifying flames. Boom! The moment the sword image descended, the raging flames in the air collapsed, and the black-garbed cultivator was swallowed up by the sword will. Not even his bones were left behind. Nyetian had used the power of the primal chaos flames in this attack, so the black-garbed cultivator couldn't fight back at all. After killing one person with a swing of his sword, Nyetian blurred into action and flew off into the distance. What he feared the most was a dozen or so people teaming up to attack him, so he used the advantage of space to separate them. Go to hell! Another black-garbed cultivator appeared, golden energy surging out of his body, forming a huge golden body around him. He punched out, and the surrounding space shook. Nyetian smiled coldly. He did not even look at the black-clothed cultivator as he stabbed out with his sword. The sword intent was sharp to the extreme, and the golden fist shadow instantly collapsed. A terrifying sword light bloomed and engulfed the black-clothed cultivator. When the other martial artists in black saw this, their bodies froze. They hadn't expected Nyetian to be so strong that he could kill one of them with a single sword strike. They were all late-stage paramount gods, and yet they couldn't fight back against Nyetian's sword. Nyetian's battle prowess was freakish. If you want to die, then come at me. Nye Tian looked at these black-clothed martial artists and growled in a deep voice. His eyes were surging with an extremely strong fighting spirit and killing intent. Die! The black-garbed cultivators weren't afraid at all. They roared and charged forward. Boom! 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 High up in the sky, more than a dozen streaks of raging power appeared and charged madly towards Nye Tian like enormous, barbaric beasts. Since you're not afraid of death, I'll fulfill your wish. Upon seeing this, Nye Tian's eyes grew cold. In the next moment, boundless star power surged around him, forming a star soul armor around him. In the next moment, he looked like a giant made of starlight. Boundless starlight flickered in the air, dazzling and beautiful, but containing the most terrifying killing intent. Star flow devours the heavens, die! Nye Tian's star power surged to the limit. He roared, and the starflow heavenly slash drew a perfect arc in the air. Suddenly, a sword image appeared, wild and mighty, terrifying to the extreme. Boom! The sword image fell from the sky, turning into endless sword waves that surged in the air. When the dozen black-clothed cultivators saw this, their eyes were filled with shock. Chapter 2178. Rumble! As the sword's shadow descended, a violent sound rang out in the air. Bang! 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 More than a dozen black-clothed figures were instantly submerged by the sword's shadow. With a muffled sound, they were sent flying and smashed into the ground like giant rocks. Nye Tian had defeated more than a dozen late-stage paramount gods with a single sword strike. His battle prowess was unimaginable. With a cold glance, Nye Tian moved and left. These black-clothed martial artists were knocked to the ground by him. Even if they didn't die, they would be seriously injured. He didn't want to waste time on them, so he chose to leave. High up in the sky, Nye Tian moved like lightning toward the Dragon Claw Valley. He originally wanted to go directly to the Thousand Demons Cave, but the two black-clothed martial artists told him that a Pai Xiu had appeared in the Dragon Claw Valley. He suspected that the Pai Xiu might be Bab, so he went to take a look. The Dragon Claw Valley wasn't far. After a while, Nye Tian landed outside a narrow valley, ready to enter. The valley in front of him was the Dragon Claw Valley. At this moment, many martial artists had gathered outside the Dragon Claw Valley, but most of them didn't enter. Instead, they chose to watch from the outside. Nye Tian looked at the Dragon Claw Valley, but he didn't rush in. Instead, he carefully sensed the aura in the surrounding space. Restriction. He immediately sensed that the Dragon Claw Valley was covered by a huge restriction, and there was a strong aura of restriction runes in the air. Before he came to the Burial Cloud Mountains, he had heard from Zhuozhua that the Burial Cloud Mountains was a battlefield in the era of the sages, and there were killing formations everywhere. Fat, is the restriction in the Dragon Claw Valley okay? Nye Tian asked cautiously to Fat Cat. Don't worry, it's just an ordinary restriction, used to suppress martial artists' strength. Fat Cat's voice sounded, and it said, it can suppress martial artists above the late-stage paramount gods, but it won't affect you at all. Good. Nye Tian nodded. Without any hesitation, he blurred into action and entered the valley. The moment he entered the valley, Nye Tian immediately sensed a strong smell of blood, causing him to frown involuntarily. Nye Tian raised his head and saw many corpses lying on the ground. He frowned slightly, but he didn't care too much about it and rushed forward. The Dragon Claw Valley was much larger than he had imagined, and it was filled with boulders and cliffs like a maze. Following the Dragon Claw Valley, Nye Tian soon arrived at a narrow entrance. On both sides of the valley were mountain cliffs that were tens of thousands of zhang tall. They stood straight like giant swords. The Pishio should be inside, Nye Tian muttered with a smile and prepared to enter. Scram! However, at this moment a furious roar came from inside. Then, a cultivator in green and a cultivator in gray appeared and stopped him. Nie Tian's eyebrows furrowed as he looked at the two of them with a strange expression on his face. I want to go in. The cultivator in green looked at Nie Tian with disdain and said cold, the Pai Xiu inside belongs to our wind sect. No one is allowed to enter. Bullshit. The Pai Xiu belongs to our blue dragon sect. The cultivator in gray glared at the cultivator in green and shouted angrily. You're the one talking nonsense. In order to catch this Pai Xiu, our wind sect lost hundreds of disciples. The Pai Xiu belongs to our wind sect. The cultivator in green roared and his aura surged. It seemed like he was about to attack. Do you think that only your divine wind sect's people died? Our blue dragon sect also lost hundreds of people. The cultivator in gray glared at the other party. Upon hearing their words, Nie Tian immediately came to a realization. It seemed that the Pai Xiu was indeed inside, but the Wind sect and Blue Dragon sect were trying to catch it. These two sects had lost many disciples in order to catch the Pai Xiu, so they were guarding the entrance and not letting anyone in. Move. Nie Tian couldn't be bothered to waste time on these two. His face darkened and he said cold. The cultivator in green and the cultivator in gray were stunned when they heard Nie Tian and stared at him. The cultivator in green said, Brat, don't you see so many people dead on the ground? You're just a piece of trash with the strength of an overgod. Are you looking to die? A piece of trash dares to covet an ancient divine beast like the Pai Xiu? Are you a King idiot? The cultivator in gray was even angrier. Cold killing intent flashed in his eyes. In order to catch the Pai Xiu, the Wind sect and Blue Dragon sect had lost many people, and they were all overgod martial artists. Under these circumstances, the two sects obviously didn't want the Pai Xiu to fall into the hands of others. Therefore, they sent disciples to guard the entrance and not let anyone in. Moreover, Nie Tian, an overgod martial artist, wanted to go in and catch the Pai Xiu. He was basically looking to die. Get the hell out of here! Nie Tian bellowed as an incomparably fierce, frosty sword aura rose from his body. The cultivator in green and the cultivator in gray felt the terrifying power in the sword aura. Their eyes trembled at the same time and they looked at each other in disbelief. Nie Tian didn't pay any attention to them as he strode forward. The two immediately reacted and wanted to stop Nie Tian, but it was too late. They didn't chase after him because they thought that even if Nie Tian went in, he would be going to die. Nie Tian moved very quickly. After a few flashes, he arrived at an empty space. Roar. At this moment, he suddenly heard a vigorous roar in the distance. It sounded like a dragon's roar, but it had a sorrowful aura. It's in front. His eyes trembled and he rushed forward. He flashed past a huge mountain cliff and saw hundreds of martial artists appear in front of him. It's here. Afterwards, Nie Tian sensed an extremely vigorous aura. His eyes could not help but tremble. He shot into the air and landed on a huge rock beside a cliff. He lowered his head and looked down. His eyes narrowed when he saw what he saw. On the ground, a huge beast that was hundreds of meters long lay there. Its huge body was riddled with scars and glaring bloody wounds. Its entire body was dyed red with blood. Huge, black chains wrapped around the beast's limbs and body. The chains gave off a powerful aura of inscriptions, as if they were some kind of powerful seal. The huge beast panted, and its eyes, which were like the sun and moon, flickered with a bloody light. Its limbs struggled, trying to stand up again. Unfortunately, it had already used up all of its power. Moreover, its body was bound by the chains, so it was difficult for it to even move. Several hundred martial artists around the beast were eager to try, but they did not dare to approach it casually. Nie Tian's eyes suddenly narrowed. He stared at the beast's eyes and finally found a trace of familiarity. It's Xiao Guai. The next moment, Nie Tian was sure that the beast in front of him was Xiao Guai. Even though Xiao Guai's appearance, size, and even aura had changed a lot, The special aura in its eyes was still there. Chapter 2179. Bab. Nye Tian was sure that the Pishio in front of him was Bab. His eyes were burning with anger. Bab was badly injured. Its body was covered with gaping wounds, and its aura was getting weaker and weaker. Nye Tian, calm down. Fat Cat could sense Nye Tian's emotions, so she warned him. Nye Tian took a deep breath and fixed his eyes on the ground. Of course, he knew why Fat Cat had told him to calm down. Bab was flanked by hundreds of warriors, all of them paramount gods. There were even some old men who were peak paramount gods, and their auras were incredibly powerful. Even though this place was protected by powerful restrictive spells, and peak paramount gods were under great pressure, these people couldn't be underestimated. These martial artists must be from the Wind Sect and the Blue Dragon Sect. They had lost a lot of people trying to catch Bab, so they were eager to try again. This animal is dying. Everyone from the Wind Sect, listen up. Let's kill this animal together. At this time, an old man in cyan robe suddenly shouted. He jumped up and his energy surged. His robe fluttered in the air. Die! The next moment, he thrust his palm out and a ghastly claw appeared in the air, which smashed toward Bab. Roar! Bab felt the danger, so it threw its head back and roared, but it sounded more like a wail. It was seriously injured, and its strength had been used up. Besides, it was tied up by a huge iron chain, so it couldn't fight back at all. Damn it! The sudden turn of events caused Nye Tian's expression to turn grim. Unable to remain calm any longer, he unfurled his wings and charged down towards the ground. Bab was already seriously injured, and it was on the verge of death. If the old man in cyan robe attacked it again, it would definitely die. Nye Tian spread his wings, which were more than 100 meters long and looked like shining stars, which made him extremely fast. God-piercing sword. While he was still in the air, he had already activated the 3 forbidden technique. His aura surged to the limit as the corner of his mouth twitched. With a low roar, he slashed down with his sword. Sword shadows poured down like a waterfall at the green-robed old man. The green-robed old man suddenly sensed that something was wrong and exclaimed in surprise. When he raised his head and saw Nye Tian, his expression changed. He had never imagined that someone would actually attack him at this time. The old man was a peak paramount god, and far stronger than any other warrior in the same level as him. However, Nye Tian's sword was too sharp. Furthermore, the green-robed elder had been caught off guard, so the latter's reaction was slightly slower. Swoosh! The moment the sword shadow fell, the green-robed old man dodged to the side, but he was still injured by the sword light. One of his arms was torn off, and blood instantly dyed half of his body red. And at this instant, Nye Tian's silhouette had already descended. He directly activated the Astral Soul Shield, blocking the fatal palm strike for little Guai. What's going on? Where did this silver-haired kid come from? The crowd was stunned by the sudden turn of events, and they began to cry out in alarm. They all turned to look at Nye Tian. Who would have thought that someone would suddenly appear at this time? Bastard! Who are you? The green-robed old man steadied himself and stared at Nye Tian with bloodshot eyes, as if he wanted to skin Nye Tian alive. After a while, the people of the Wind God sect came to their senses and looked at the green-robed old man in astonishment. Elder Sun. The green-robed old man's name was Sun Zhangqi, and he was an elder of the Wind God sect. He had a high status in the sect. The people of the Wind God sect were very surprised that Nye Tian had directly cut off one of Sun Zhangqi's arms. If Sun Zhangqi's reaction had been a bit slower, he would have died. How could Nye Tian be so strong? At this time, Nye Tian didn't care about the others at all. He landed next to Xiao Guai and looked into its eyes. Xiao Guai. When Xiao Guai saw Nye Tian, it was very angry at first. However, when it sensed Nye Tian's aura, its huge pupils shrank, and tears of blood flowed out of its eyes. Xiao Guai, don't worry. I will take you away from here. Nie Tian's heart skipped a beat, and he nodded firmly. Since he had met Xiao Guai here, of course, he would take it away. However, this was not easy. The Wind God sect and the Blue Dragon sect were eyeing Nie Tian covetously, and they obviously wouldn't let him leave easily. When Sun Zhangqi heard Nie Tian's words, he shouted angrily and stared at Nie Tian coldly. This kid wants to take the Pai Xiu away. Kill him! Kill him! The other martial artists roared at the same time. Immediately, many of them attacked Nie Tian in a frenzy. Go to hell! Nie Tian let out a bellow as his purple heaven lightning battle armor lit up and enveloped little Guai. Then, he flapped his wings and shot up into the sky, wreathed in raging sword intent. What these people had done to Xiao Guai made Nie Tian very angry. He was going to kill them all today. Nie Tian's sword essence was surging, and at the same time, it was accompanied by his blood qi. Stimulated by the blood qi, the power of his sword essence was increased several times, and then the sword sealing forbidden array was opened. Bang! 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 The sword will was like an ocean, surging in the air. The rolling waves spread out in all directions. Many warriors couldn't withstand the impact of the sword will and were directly sent flying. Seeing Nie Tian's fearlessness, some of the more powerful martial artists couldn't help but pause and take the initiative to retreat. How could this kid be so strong? The people of the Wind sect and the Blue Dragon sect looked at Nie Tian with trembling eyes. They were deeply shocked by Nie Tian's strength. The Wind sect and the Blue Dragon sect were top sects in the land of the abandoned. Although their comprehensive strength couldn't compare with top forces like the Dark Moon Holy sect and the Inua dynasty, they were definitely very powerful. Now, the hundreds of disciples of the two sects were actually very afraid of a young martial artist. This was a rare scene. Elder Peng, this kid's strength is strange and unpredictable. Why don't we join hands and kill him first? At this time, the elder of the Wind sect, Sun Zhangqi, looked at an elder in a gray robe and said in a deep voice. Peng Song, the elder of the Blue Dragon sect, looked at Sun Zhangqi and nodded. I accept Elder Sun's suggestion. We have lost hundreds of disciples to catch this Pai Xiu, and this kid wants to take it away. Isn't he looking down on us? If we don't kill this kid today, how can the Blue Dragon sect and the Wind sect establish a foothold in the land of the abandoned in the future? Then, Peng Song's eyes turned cold. He glanced at the disciples of the Blue Dragon sect and said loudly, Disciples of the Blue Dragon sect, listen up. Kill this silver-haired kid at all costs. Seeing this, Sun Zhangqi nodded and said loudly, Disciples of the Wind sect, listen up. Whoever can kill this silver-haired martial artist, I guarantee that he will be promoted to our sect's core disciple. Yes. Yes. Chapter 2180. Nie Tian sensed the strong killing intent in the space, but he was not afraid at all. Instead, he was calm and serious. Since the Wind sect and the Blue Dragon sect had joined hands, Nie Tian would fight with them to his heart's content. Let's attack together and kill him. At this time, someone in the crowd shouted angrily. Hundreds of martial artists moved at the same time. Their qi power combined and turned into endless pressure, which shrouded Nie Tian. God-sealing sword formation, world-devouring sword dragon. Seeing this, Nie Tian was not afraid at all. He shouted angrily. The sword essence and blood qi around him became violent, and the horrible power of the formation was flowing in the void. Boom! In the next moment, he lashed out with his sword. The power of the formation and the power of the sword will instantly condensed and fused together. A sword dragon that was thousands of meters long appeared. Its whole body was burning with the terrifying power of flames. It tumbled into the sky. Rumble! The sword dragon roared, and its momentum was surging. A horrible sound came from the void, and the horrible power was raging in the space. At this moment, Nie Tian's figure suddenly sank down. With a flap of the wings on his back, he dived down. He stabbed the star's heavenly slash in his hand crazily. A strand of sword essence rushed out and turned into several sharp sword shadows in the air, rushing toward Bab. Bang! 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 The moment the sword shadow fell, the iron chains around Bab were directly cut off in a flash of fire. Bab, come in! Nye Tian was shocked. 9 superbs appeared in his hand. Then, a space-time light appeared and covered the huge body of the Pishio. Growl! Bab roared in a low voice. It used all its strength to move its body and disappeared in the void. Seeing Bab had entered the 9 superbs, Nye Tian let out a long sigh of relief. Oh no! That Pishio is gone. At this time, someone saw the scene below and cried out in alarm, shouting loudly. The others immediately looked over. The ground was empty, leaving only a dripping bloodstain, but there was no trace of the Pishio. How is that possible? Everyone was shocked. They couldn't believe their eyes. A giant beast that was hundreds of meters long had disappeared into thin air just like that. This kid has a space-time treasure on him. Azure Dragon Sect Elder Pungsong could be considered to have seen the world. He immediately understood and shouted, "Everyone, don't be nervous. The Pishio is on him. As long as we kill him, we will definitely be able to find the Pishio." The people of the 2 sects finally reacted. Their gazes toward Nye Tian were filled with even more intense killing intent. Go to hell. In the next moment, a cultivator in green robes roared and attacked from a tricky angle, trying to sneak an attack on Nye Tian. You think you can kill me? Nye Tian's reaction was extremely fast. With a cold roar, he didn't even look at that person and directly stabbed with his sword. A scream came from the air, and that person's figure was instantly submerged by the sword. This guy is so terrifying. When the others saw this, they were once again afraid of Nye Tian's strength. They couldn't understand how Nye Tian could easily crush a cultivator of the same level as him when he was clearly only a late-stage paramount god. However, they didn't know that Nye Tian's true cultivation was only a peak overgod. If they knew that the person who crushed them was only an overgod, they would probably have a different expression. Are you afraid now? Nye Tian saw everyone's reaction. The corner of his mouth twitched and he growled, "If you know fear, then get the hell out of my way." With that, the wings on his back suddenly unfurled, and the space in the air tightened. His figure was like a bolt of lightning as he shot straight toward the dozens of cultivators. Sword Heart's End Moon! He slashed out, and the surging sword intent in the air condensed into a huge sword that shot out. The sword images were like dragons, opening a path in the air and forcing dozens of cultivators to retreat. A few cultivators could not dodge in time and were sent flying. While they were still in the air, they exploded and turned into clumps of scarlet light that dissipated. When the others saw Nye Tian's valiance, they all instinctively retreated. Now's my chance. Nye Tian smiled when he saw this, and the wings on his back flapped as he shot into the air. A bunch of trash! Pungsong roared when he saw this and he cursed, "This kid wants to escape. Stop him!" His figure suddenly moved, and an extremely violent power formed around him. It actually condensed into an illusory dragon that charged straight at Nye Tian. Roar! As Pungsong let out a furious roar, the azure dragon shadow around him seemed to have sensed his aura. It opened its mouth and let out a dragon roar. Immediately afterwards, it unleashed a terrifying amount of azure dragon power, which condensed into a streak of violent energy that shot towards Pungsong like a sharp arrow. Blue Dragon Roar! The disciples of the Blue Dragon sect exclaimed in unison when they saw this scene. The martial skill that Pungsong was using was one of the 3 sect-guarding martial skills of the Blue Dragon sect, Blue Dragon Roar. Nye Tian frowned when he felt a violent force coming at him from behind. His face suddenly turned cold, and he said in a deep voice, "Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish." As soon as he finished speaking, the 9 dragon veins in his body began to circulate wildly. Waves of violent dragon chi were released, and a sea of crimson lightning appeared behind him. An enormous dragon shadow emerged from the sea of lightning. "Reckless fool, I'll let you see what a real dragon roar is." Nie Tian spun around and fixed his eyes on Peng Song. The huge crimson dragon rolled out from behind him. As it moved, the space around it trembled, and its dragon might shook heaven and earth. Roar! The next moment, the crimson dragon roared at the sky, and a powerful dragon chi spread out. A terrifying force exploded in the sky and rushed down. Boom, boom, boom. Following this, a deafening explosion could be heard as a terrifying force slammed onto Peng Song's body, shattering the illusionary azure dragon around him. Bang! Then, under the watchful eyes of countless people, Peng Song's body was sent flying, and he fell to the ground, leaving a trail of blood in the air. Lord Elder! At this moment, a disciple of the Blue Dragon sect reacted, and rushed out to catch Peng Song at the most critical moment. The disciple retreated a few hundred meters and finally stabilized himself. He looked at Peng Song and asked in surprise, "Lord Elder, are you all right?" At this time, the people from the Blue Dragon sect and the Divine Wind sect all looked over. They saw that Peng Song was covered in blood, but his aura was still stable. He had managed to preserve his life. Luckily, the disciple of the Blue Dragon sect caught Peng Song in time. Otherwise, Peng Song would have been dead for sure. Chapter 2181. Seeing that Peng Song was coughing up blood again, the crowd finally realized how seriously injured he was. They all sucked in a breath of cold air and were speechless. Nie Tian's battle prowess was simply too shocking and beyond their imagination. Elder Sun Zhangqi of the Divine Wind sect had one of his arms cut off by Nie Tian. Elder Peng Song of the Blue Dragon sect had been seriously injured by Nie Tian and had almost died. Both of them were elders in their respective sections. They were people with extremely high statuses in their sections. But now, in front of Nie Tian, they were as weak as sheep. Everyone knew that even under the suppression of the restrictive spell, Sun Zhangqi and Peng Song's strength was comparable to that of a peak paramount god. But in front of Nie Tian, they didn't even have the right to stand. Didn't that mean that Nie Tian's strength was far greater than theirs? Sun Zhangqi saw that Peng Song was seriously injured, but the corner of his mouth curved into a smile, as if he was glad that his injuries were light. Only now did he realize how lucky he was. If he hadn't dodged that sword attack, he would have died without a doubt. "Anyone else wants to kill me?" Nie Tian's gaze swept across the crowd as he bellowed in an arrogant and domineering manner. Hundreds of martial artists fell silent. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Nie Tian was too terrifying. He was someone they couldn't afford to offend. These people were a bit stupid. If they attacked together, even Nie Tian wouldn't be able to escape. "Humph! A bunch of cowards!" Nie Tianling sneered and prepared to leave. "You think you're so strong after injuring an elder of the Blue Dragon sect?" However, at this moment, a low and deep voice suddenly resounded in the sky. Soon after, a frightening force descended. It agglomerated into a dragon claw in the sky and violently smashed downwards. Nie Tian couldn't help but frown when he sensed the terrifying force. He immediately used his sword energy to meet the dragon claw. Boom! In the next moment, two extremely powerful forces collided with each other. Space shook violently, and the surrounding mountains and cliffs trembled as if they were about to collapse. Nie Tian felt the force pressing down on him, forcing his body to sink. He flapped his wings with all his might and stabilized his body. He looked up into the sky and saw a black-robed old man standing there with a pair of cold eyes staring at him. "Great Elder!" When the people of the Blue Dragon sect saw the black-clothed old man's face, they cried out in unison and shouted out his identity. Peng Song's eyes also trembled, and instantly became pleasantly surprised. He did not expect that the Great Elder would personally appear. The old man in black was none other than the Blue Dragon sect's Grand Elder, Lu Jinyuan. This person's aura is far stronger than the other two elders. Nie Tian's divine sense swept over, and Lu Jinyuan's aura shocked him. He guessed that Lu Jinyuan's strength should be similar to Xian Zongfeng's. Kid, you're not bad. You can actually block this elder's azure dragon hand. At this time, Lu Jinyuan's eyes darkened slightly, and he actually smiled and said, "This elder will give you a chance to live now. As long as you are willing to join the Blue Dragon sect and take me as your master, I will spare your life. How about it?" "What? The Grand Elder wants to take this kid as his disciple?" When the disciples of the Blue Dragon sect heard Lu Jinyuan's words, they all exclaimed and looked at Nie Tian in disbelief. Who would have thought that not only did Lu Jinyuan not kill Nie Tian, he also wanted to take him as his disciple. In the Blue Dragon sect, Lu Jinyuan's status and strength were second only to the Supreme Elders and the sect master. Countless disciples of the Blue Dragon sect wanted to take Lu Jinyuan as their master. But now, such a good thing had actually fallen into Nie Tian's hands. How could they be willing? But thinking about it carefully, it was not surprising. After all, Nie Tian's talent was too strong. He even blocked Lu Jinyuan's Azure Dragon Hand. Azure Dragon Hand, this was one of the three major martial arts of the Blue Dragon sect. One could imagine how powerful it was when it was used by Lu Jinyuan. However, Nie Tian had withstood the attack head-on. How terrifying! Grand Elder, this! Pring Song was dazed for a moment, and he looked embarrassed. Just as he was about to speak, he was interrupted by Lu Jinyuan. "Kid, I am the Grand Elder of the Blue Dragon sect, Lu Jinyuan." Lu Jinyuan saw a strange smile on the corner of Nie Tian's mouth and thought that the latter was hesitating, so he said, "In the Blue Dragon sect, there are countless people who want to take me as their master. As long as you join the Blue Dragon sect and take me as your master, what you just did will be written off, and you will also be trained by the Blue Dragon sect. What do you think?" On the surface, Lu Jinyuan wanted to take Nie Tian as his disciple, but secretly, he had another plan. The palm just now showed him that Nie Tian's talent could be called monstrous. However, what he was interested in at the moment was not Nie Tian's talent, but the latter's dragon vein. Lu Jinyuan didn't expect that he would actually meet someone who had a dragon vein. As long as he obtained Nie Tian's dragon vein, his Azure Dragon Hand would definitely be able to advance to the next level, and his strength would even have a qualitative leap. At this moment, Nie Tian was looking at Lu Jinyuan, the corners of his mouth curled up into a strange smile. His eyes were filled with a very playful look. For others, being able to enter the Blue Dragon sect and be a disciple of Lu Jinyuan was definitely a great thing. But in the eyes of Nie Tian, this was completely not worth mentioning. In fact, it was a kind of insult to him. After entering the land of the abandoned, Nie Tian had seen many freakishly powerful experts. The Dark Azura deity, the Een Moon Emperor, 3 legendary swordsmen, and a mysterious person with unfathomable strength. Any one of these people could easily crush Lu Jinyuan. A mere peak paramount god wanting to take Nie Tian as a disciple was simply a joke. Moreover, Nie Tian felt that he didn't need a master at all. He didn't like to cultivate step by step. He liked to constantly challenge and improve his strength. If he really needed a master, he would definitely find someone as strong as the mysterious person. At the very least, there was still Ming Jianyu. No matter what, trash like Lu Jinyuan wouldn't have a chance. More importantly, Nie Tian could tell that Lu Jinyuan didn't want to take him as a disciple, but rather wanted something from him. Lu Jinyuan's eyes were filled with passion and greed. This wasn't the look of someone who wanted to take a disciple. At this moment, everyone's eyes were focused on Nie Tian, waiting for his answer. "Lu Jinyuan, you want to take me as a disciple, right?" At that moment, Nie Tian finally opened his mouth. A disdainful smile hung at the corner of his mouth as he said, "Unfortunately, you don't deserve it. You don't deserve it." Nie Tian's voice wasn't loud, but each word was like a clap of thunder in everyone's ears. Everyone's eyes trembled as they looked at Nie Tian in disbelief. They hadn't expected that Nye Tian would refuse Lu Jinyuan's request to take him as a disciple. Under these circumstances, wasn't Nye Tian courting death by refusing? When Lu Jinyuan heard Nye Tian's words, his face darkened, and his eyes turned bloodshot. Chapter 2182. Brat, what did you just say? Say it one more time. Suddenly, Lu Jinyuan roared furiously, and a sinister voice rolled out from his throat. He was clearly enraged to the extreme, and even his body was trembling slightly. He had taken the initiative to accept Nye Tian as his disciple in front of so many people and promised Nye Tian that he would give him the best cultivation resources. But in the end, he was told that he wasn't worthy. One could imagine the anger in his heart. He was the first elder of the Blue Dragon sect. When had he ever been humiliated like this? Therefore, he could no longer suppress the anger in his heart. I said, "You're not worthy." Facing the enraged Lu Jinyuan, Nye Tian sneered. His voice was clearer and louder than before. Lu Jinyuan's face turned red, as if he had been slapped a few times. His eyes darkened and he roared, "Little bastard, you're asking for it." Amidst the violent roar, Lu Jinyuan's aura suddenly surged. His figure moved, and a shadow of a blue dragon appeared around his body. He was like a wild beast that had gone berserk as he pounced at Nye Tian. What a terrifying aura! Everyone's expression changed as they exclaimed in shock. They knew that Lu Jinyuan was really furious this time. Good timing! Facing Lu Jinyuan's violent attack, Nye Tian's lips twitched, and the murderous intent and battle intent in his eyes surged at the same time. Since Lu Jinyuan wanted to fight, Nye Tian would fight with him. Boom! In an instant, Nye Tian's dragon chi rose again, and the giant scarlet golden dragon appeared. A terrifying aura spread in the void, causing the surrounding space to tremble. When the others saw this, their eyes trembled. They were not shocked by Nye Tian's aura, but his courage. No one had expected that Nye Tian would dare to fight Lu Jinyuan head-on under such circumstances. Little bastard, go to hell! Lu Jinyuan hovered in midair, and his eyes were filled with murderous intent. As long as he killed Nye Tian, he could also obtain the latter's dragon vein. Roar! Nye Tian was not afraid at all. With a thought, the crimson golden dragon roared and pounced straight at Lu Jinyuan. The crimson gold dragon's body was more than 3,000 meters long. As it rolled through the void, it appeared to be boundlessly huge. The huge dragon's body surged with the terrifying power of thunder, and at the same time, it was also burning with a terrifying and strange flame. This time, Nye Tian used the chaos flames to unleash the full power of the dragon vein. Courting death. Lu Jinyuan let out a low roar, and the azure dragon image around him suddenly expanded several times in size. He refused to believe that a peak paramount god like himself wouldn't be able to defeat Nye Tian. Under the watchful eyes of countless people, the two giant dragons rapidly approached each other and finally collided. Boom! In the blink of an eye, a frightening explosion sounded out as the entire space started to tremble. Waves of violent energy burst out in all directions. The crowd felt the terrifying power and retreated. Boom! Bang! 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 Waves of violent energy bombarded the surrounding cliffs of the mountains, and the tens of thousands of meters tall mountain cracked under the bombardment. It swayed in the air as if it was about to collapse. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. Ear-piercing sounds rang out in the air as the bodies of the two giant dragons tore at each other, trying to destroy the other completely. The crowd looked at the scene in front of them with blank expressions, unable to believe what they were seeing. At this moment, they finally realized how terrifying Nye Tian's strength was. Boom! Crack, crack, crack. At this moment, an explosive sound rang out, followed by terrifying tearing sounds. The eyes of the crowd trembled. They saw that in the air, that illusory figure of the azure dragon was actually being torn apart. Waves of terrifying energy were directly collapsing in the space. Kill! At this moment, Nye Tion's angry roar rang out in the air, and the chaos flames on the crimson dragon's body suddenly became violent. Puff! Boom! Then, a line of fire whizzed out and directly spread in the air into a sea of fire, enveloping the space where Lu Jinyuan was. At this moment, there was no azure dragon image around Lu Jinyuan's body. He felt the hot air rushing towards him, causing his face to turn pale, and his expression to stiffen. No! Don't kill me! The next moment, Lu Jinyuan felt the real aura of death, and he actually cried out in pain. However, it was too late. The violent sea of fire engulfed Lu Jinyuan's figure in an instant. The sudden scene caused everyone's pupils to constrict, and their nerves to tense up to the extreme. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, who would believe that the dignified first elder of the Blue Dragon sect had died just like that? Everyone's expression was extremely shocked, as if even their breathing had stopped, and they could only stare blankly at the void space. The flames and dragon chi in the sky lasted for a long time before dissipating. The space gradually became clear, and a silver-haired figure appeared in the sky. It was Nye Tion. However, Lu Jinyuan's figure had disappeared forever. In a direct confrontation, Lu Jinyuan had died miserably. Perhaps even until his death, he didn't understand how Nye Tion could defeat him. At this moment, Nye Tion had a faint smile on his face, and his expression was extremely calm. Although killing Lu Jinyuan was very difficult, it was still within his expectations. Lu Jinyuan was originally suppressed by the restriction in the Dragon Claw Valley, so he couldn't use his full strength. On the other hand, the power of Nye Tion's dragon vein had a strong suppressive effect on the power of the Azure Dragon. Under such circumstances, Nye Tion used the chaotic flames to activate the power of the dragon vein to the extreme, and finally killed Lu Jinyuan. Under normal circumstances, if Lu Jinyuan's strength wasn't suppressed, Nye Tion wouldn't have any chance of winning. You want to take me as your disciple with only this kind of strength? What a joke! Nye Tianling sneered, then swept his gaze across the crowd below, and didn't say anything else. His figure moved, and he directly left. The two elders and hundreds of disciples watched as Nye Tion left. They didn't even dare to move, let alone chase after him. When Nye Tion's figure disappeared, these people finally moved, but their eyes were still filled with shock. Leave! The two elders, Sun Zhangqi and Peng Song, finally reacted and quickly left with their respective sect disciples. They had to immediately return to the sect and inform the upper echelons of what had happened here. The Divine Wind sect and Blue Dragon sect had lost hundreds of people to capture the Pai Xiu. Now, the Pai Xiu was taken away, and the Blue Dragon sect's first elder was killed. They definitely wouldn't let this matter go. After Nye Tion left the Dragon Claw Valley, he sprinted for a long time, and only slowed down after making sure that no one was chasing after him. Nye Tion, your dragon vein is seriously injured. I'm afraid it will take a few days for it to recover. Don't use the power of the dragon vein for now. At that moment, the fat cat's voice could be heard, and it reminded Nye Tion. Nye Tion nodded. He obviously knew that the dragon vein was injured. Lu Jinyuan's strength was terrifying, and Nye Tion had paid a great price to kill him. Luckily, the people of the Divine Wind sect and Blue Dragon sect didn't notice that Nye Tion was injured. Otherwise, it would not be easy for him to escape. Next, Nye Tion found a hidden valley and took out the 9 extremities. Chapter 2183. In the valley, Nye Tion took a deep breath and activated the holographic divine patterns. After making sure there was no one around, he opened the 9 superbs. In a flash of space-time light, Bab appeared, along with a young man. It was none other than Lin Chen. What? Nye Tion took a few steps back. When he saw Bab, he was surprised. How did you recover so fast? Bab's aura was still weak at the moment, but there were fewer wounds on its body. Most of the wounds had turned into scars, and only the deep ones were bleeding. Nie Tian knew that Pisho was a direct descendant of the divine dragon, and its recovery ability was very strong. However, he didn't believe that Bab's recovery ability could be so strong. Roar! Roar! At this moment, Bab seemed to have sensed Nie Tian's confusion. It stuck its head over and rubbed Nie Tian a few times, but its huge eyes were fixed on Lin Chen. Nie Tian touched Bab's head, then turned around to look at Lin Chen. To his surprise, Lin Chen's face was as pale as a piece of paper, and his breath was much weaker. Lin Chen, what's going on? Nie Tian asked with a puzzled look on his face. Brother Nie Tian, Bab is your friend, right? I saw that it was badly injured, so I treated it, Lin Chen said with a faint smile. Looking at Nie Tian, he was quite proud. It's you. Nie Tian's expression flickered with astonishment as he asked, Did you help little Guai recover from its injuries? Yes. Lin Chen smiled. He was happy to be able to help Nie Tian. Well, Nie Tian was struck dumb. Lin Chen, how did you do that? He knew that Lil Guai was seriously injured. It was on its last gasp and its life was in danger. He had planned to stabilize Bab's condition with the power of the source of the earth, and then let Bab recover on its own. But now, Xiao Guai was fine, except that its breath was still a little weak. Lin Chen was only a child of 6 or 7 years old. His origin spirit had not even awakened yet. How could he help a Pisho recover from its injuries in an instant? This was simply too strange. Use my blood. Lin Chen smiled proudly. He suddenly raised his arm and showed his wrist to Nie Tian. Your blood. Nie Tian frowned. He immediately noticed that there were traces of blood on Lin Chen's wrist, as well as 2 small teeth marks. All of a sudden, he realized that Lin Chen had used his own blood to heal Bab's injury. No wonder Lin Chen's face was so pale. Nie Tian understood and couldn't help but feel warm in his heart. Looking at Lin Chen, he solemnly nodded and said, Lin Chen, thank you. Brother Nie Tian, we are friends. Friends should help each other. Lin Chen giggled, her bright eyes flickered, and she said sneakily, I think big brother Nie Tian will help me find my brother, right? Nie Tian saw the cunning look in Lin Chen's eyes. He smiled and nodded. Don't worry. I will definitely help you find your brother. Although this Lin Chen was young, his mind was very nimble. He knew that he was too weak to find his brother, so he wanted Nie Tian to help. But he was too embarrassed to say it out loud, so he put in some effort on Bab. Nie Tian could tell that Lin Chen was a smart and innocent child. Since Lin Chen had helped him heal Bab, he would definitely help Bab find its brother. In fact, Nie Tian didn't need Lin Chen to say it out loud. He had already made up his mind to not leave Bab alone. Thank you, brother Nie Tian. Lin Chen smiled happily. He was so excited that he was about to jump up and down. Nie Tian looked at Lin Chen, but he was thinking about something. He didn't expect Lin Chen's blood to be so powerful. It almost instantly healed Bab's injury. Lin Chen was a 9-elemental combination martial artist. The 9 elemental meridians in his body were dragon meridians. It was not surprising that his blood had special powers. But this kind of power was a little too powerful. It was really terrifying. Nie Tian had a feeling that even his own bloodline might not be as powerful as this. Nie Tian, the reason why this brat's blood is so powerful is not only because of his 9 origins meridians and dragon meridians. There are even greater secrets hidden within his body. At this moment, little fat cat sighed inwardly with a bitter smile on its face. In fact, he had discovered a bigger secret in Lin Chen. But he didn't tell this secret to Nie Tian. Lin Chen, how do you know Bab's name? Suddenly, Nie Tian thought of something and asked in surprise. Earlier, Lin Chen had called out Bab's name. But Nie Tian remembered that he didn't tell Lin Chen the name. How did Lin Chen know? I can understand what Bab is saying. Lin Chen smiled proudly. Suddenly, he jumped to Bab's side and raised his hands to grab a strand of Bab's fur. Bab lowered its head and looked very docile. Nie Tian was speechless. He didn't know what to say for a long time. Lin Chen could understand what Bab was saying. That was beyond Nye Tian's expectation. Big brother Nye Tian, I'll tell you a secret. Actually, there's something very terrifying inside of me. Lin Chen's eyes suddenly flickered as he said to Nye Tian in a very serious tone. Scary thing? What is it? Nye Tian was dazed for a second and couldn't help but ask. I don't know. Lin Chen shook his head and said nervously, Grandpa said that the thing inside my body is the hope of our people. If anything happens to me, our family will face a great disaster. Nye Tian looked at Lin Chen and couldn't help but be stunned. He didn't know what to say. Lin Chen's words gave him a faint, uneasy premonition. There were more and more secrets in Lin Chen's body, which made him more and more unfathomable. Lin Chen, how long have you been away from the family? Nye Tian suddenly thought of this question and asked with a frown. According to Lin Chen, he was very important to his family. So, if he suddenly left the family, it would definitely cause panic in his family. Many days. Lin Chen's little face was twisted. He said worriedly, If Grandpa finds out that I am not here, he will be worried. Nye Tian smiled bitterly and patted Lin Chen's shoulder. Lin Chen, don't worry. I will help you find your brother as soon as possible and then send you home. Thank you, brother Nye Tian. Lin Chen raised his head and his eyes were shining like gems. Nye Tian nodded and then let Xiao Guai enter the 9 superbs. Since Xiao Guai's injury had been stabilized, there was nothing to worry about. He just needed to let it rest in the 9 superbs. When Xiao Guai's injury was completely healed, it could help Nye Tian at a critical moment. Lin Chen, let's go. We are going to the 1,000 Demons Cave. Nye Tian didn't care about his injury and was ready to go to the 1,000 Demons Cave immediately. Yes. Lin Chen nodded heavily, unable to hide the excitement in his heart. Nye Tian smiled and suddenly thought of something. He couldn't help but ask, Lin Chen, what is your brother's name? Why is he going to the 1,000 Demons Cave? Lin Chen nodded and said unhurriedly, My brother is called Lin Yi. He is going to the 1,000 Demons Cave with his family to look for something. Look for what? Nye Tian's eyes narrowed as he asked. Chapter 2184. Lin Chen, what did you say? When Nye Tian heard Lin Chen's words, his eyes suddenly trembled and he anxiously asked. He had clearly heard Lin Chen mention the dragon spring vein. This made him somewhat uncertain, so he asked again. I said, My brother and my clansmen seem to have gone to the 1,000 Demons Cave to find something called the dragon spring vein. Lin Chen repeated himself. When he raised his head, he saw that Nye Tian's expression had stiffened. He couldn't help asking, Big brother Nye Tian, what's wrong? Nye Tian was stunned for a few seconds before he reacted. He shook his head and said, I'm fine. He really didn't expect that Lin Chen's brother and clansmen would actually go to the 1,000 Demons Cave to find the dragon spring vein. Previously, Nye Tian had already guessed that Lin Chen might be from the Protector clan. Now, he was absolutely certain that Lin Chen was from the Protector clan. Originally, there were very few people who knew about the dragon spring vein, and those who knew where it was hidden were even rarer. Huadong had told Nye Tian that other than the Spirit Dragon Emperor ring, there were 5 Spirit Dragon King rings. Each of these 5 Spirit Dragon King rings contained a hidden dragon map that recorded the location of the dragon spring vein. Lin Chen's clansmen knew that the dragon spring vein was hidden in the 1,000 Demons Cave. Clearly, they had the Spirit Dragon King rings. After guessing all this, Nye Tian took a deep breath and slightly calmed his excited heart. He didn't ask Lin Chen too much because he felt that a 6 or 7-year-old child wouldn't know too much. But he was already certain that the 1,000 Demons Cave not only contained the spacetime crystal essence he was looking for, but also a dragon spring vein. But to find the location of the dragon spring vein, he first had to find Lin Chen's brother, Lin Yi. According to Lin Chen, Lin Yi and the others had already entered the 1,000 Demons Cave several months ago. Even Lin Chen's clansmen believed that Lin Yi and the others were already dead. Right now, Nie Tian couldn't confirm whether Lin Yi was still alive or not. All the truth would only be known after entering the Thousand Demons Cave. Nie Tian brought Lin Chen along. Their speed was not fast as they slowly moved towards the Thousand Devils Cave. Nie Tian discovered that there were quite a few people who wanted to enter the Thousand Devils Cave. As they got closer and closer to the Thousand Devils Cave, the number of people surrounding them also increased. Most of the people were in groups, ranging from a few dozen to 7 or 8 people. There was only one family like Nie Tian and Lin Chen, who only had 2 people. When the others saw Nie Tian and Lin Chen, their faces were filled with doubt. They could not hide the disdain in their eyes. Nie Tian didn't pay any attention to them, and headed directly towards the Thousand Demons Cave. The friend in front, please wait a moment. At this time, a clear voice suddenly sounded behind Nie Tian and Lin Chen. It was very melodious, like a wind chime, giving people a feeling of a spring breeze. Nie Tian's body froze. He turned around and saw a girl in purple slowly walking towards them. This girl looked very young, around 20 years old. Her actual age should not be that old either. Her facial features were exquisite, beautiful, and exquisite. Her face was filled with a sincere smile, giving people a very comfortable feeling. However, behind her, there were 7 or 8 young men following. Their faces were gloomy and they seemed very unfriendly. Miss, what can I do for you? Nie Tian looked at the girl in purple and asked with a faint smile. My friend, my name is Ouyang Yufei. May I ask how I should address you? The girl in purple had a pair of clear eyes as she said very enthusiastically. My name is Lin Chen. He is big brother Nie Tian, Lin Chen said without waiting for Nie Tian to speak. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. Although Ouyang Yufei was very enthusiastic, he was still very cautious. Miss Yufei, what can I do for you? Nie Tian asked with a faint smile as he took a step forward. May I ask if you are going to the Thousand Demons Cave? Ouyang Yufei's gentle lips curled up as she asked. Nie Tian nodded. He could not help but look at the people behind Ouyang Yufei. Big brother Nie Tian, we are also going to the Thousand Demons Cave. Why don't we go together? Ouyang Yufei said sincerely with a sweet smile. Junior sister, what are you saying? Just as Ouyang Yufei finished speaking, a young man walked out from behind her. He seemed very dissatisfied as he looked cold at Nie Tian and Lin Chen. Senior brother Ling, I want to invite big brother Nie Tian and the others to go with us, Ouyang Yufei said to Ling Yusong with a faint smile. Go with them? Ling Yusong's eyes flickered. Her gaze swept over Nie Tian and Lin Chen with extreme disdain. Her attitude was very arrogant. However, due to Ouyang Yufei's presence, Ling Yusong did not say much. She only said cold, Junior sister, we are going to the Thousand Demons Cave this time to complete the mission given to us by the sect. We cannot bring other people. Senior brother Ling, but the 2 of them. Ouyang Yufei's beautiful eyes flickered. She still wanted to say something, but she was directly interrupted by Ling Yusong. Junior sister, I am the person in charge of this mission. If I say I won't bring them, then I won't. Ling Yusong forcefully interrupted Ouyang Yufei. Her eyes were extremely cold and filled with disdain. At this time, Nie Tian smiled faintly and said to Ouyang Yufei, Miss Yufei, we appreciate your good intentions. Since your senior brother does not welcome us, then there is no need to force it. After speaking, Nie Tian directly turned around and prepared to leave. Of course, he could see what was going on in front of him. He just did not want to continue being entangled. Ouyang Yufei had good intentions. She saw that Nie Tian and Lin Chen were very weak, so she wanted them to join her team and provide protection for the 2 of them. However, Ling Yusong clearly did not want 2 weak people to join, so she coldly refused. Actually, speaking of which, Ling Yusong did not do anything wrong. After all, no one wanted their team to be weak. Big Brother Nyetian, I feel that you too shouldn't enter the Thousand Demons Cave. That place is too dangerous for you. At this time, Ouyang Yufei's voice rang out. She looked at Nyetian and still wanted to say something, but she hesitated and did not say it. Don't worry, nothing will happen to us. Nyetian smiled faintly. His expression was extremely calm. Humph. At this time, Ling Yusong laughed coldly, as if she could not help it anymore. She coldly said, "A piece of trash with the strength of a main god and a child who is still wet behind the ears. You want to enter the Thousand Demons Cave with such a lineup? You're simply looking to die. You two idiots, what do you think the Thousand Demons Cave is? A market? No divine formation master, no sealing master, nothing. I'm afraid you won't even be able to find the entrance to the Thousand Demons Cave." As she spoke, Ling Yusong pulled Ouyang Yufei up and said, "Junior sister, let's go. There is no need to waste time on these two idiots." Wait. Just as Ling Yusong was about to leave with Ouyang Yufei, Nyetian's voice rang out. "What, are you not convinced?" Ling Yusong's figure froze. She turned back to look at Nyetian, her eyes cold and contemptuous. Chapter 2185. Nyetian's voice was low, and his eyes were filled with uncontrollable rage. "Big Brother Nyetian, that's not what Senior Brother Ling meant, is it?" Ouyang Yufei could tell that Nyetian was really angry, so she hurriedly explained. At the same time, she looked nervously at Ling Yusong, as if she was worried that he would do something rash. He knows very well what he meant. The corner of Nyetian's mouth curled up slightly. "You're a genius. You can look down on me, but you can't insult me." "So what if I insult you?" Ling Yusong's eyes darkened, and his expression turned cold. "I, Ling Yusong, am one of the 3 geniuses of the Wind God sect. I'm already a late paramount god. And you're just a nameless nobody. You're only a peak over god. With my, Ling Yusong's, identity and strength, being willing to insult you is already thinking highly of you." As the cold voice fell, Ling Yusong's attitude became even more arrogant. His eyes flickered with a cold light, appearing extremely sinister. Nyetian couldn't help but frown when he heard Ling Yusong's words, and the corner of his mouth twitched. He hadn't expected Ling Yusong to be from the Wind God sect. He had just come into contact with the Wind God sect, and he had even severed the arm of one of their elders, Sun Zhangqi. Now, a disciple of the Wind God sect was acting so arrogantly in front of him. He couldn't help but find it laughable. "Oh? What are you laughing at, you brat?" Ling Yusong asked coldly when he saw the corner of Nyetian's mouth twitch. He could clearly sense the deep contempt in Nyetian's smile. An over-god martial artist was looking down on him, a supreme god martial artist. This was practically challenging the limits of his tolerance. In truth, he had long since wanted to make a move against Nyetian. It was only because Ouyang Yufei was present that he had been suppressing himself. If Nyetian really didn't know what was good for him, he wouldn't mind teaching him a lesson. "I'm laughing because you're ridiculous," Nyetian said coldly, raising his eyebrows. "I'm ridiculous? I'm laughable?" Ling Yusong's eyes narrowed, immediately revealing killing intent. He growled, "Stinking brat, you're courting death." He had tolerated it for a long time. How could he tolerate Nye Tianling's provocation? Boom! Ling Yusong took a step forward, and the aura around her rose. A huge pressure directly enveloped Nye Tian. "Senior Brother Ling, don't!" Ouyang Yufei cried out in alarm when she saw this. She didn't expect that Ling Yusong would still make a move. In her opinion, Nye Tian was only a peak over god. It was impossible for him to be Ling Yusong's opponent. What was even more troublesome was that Nye Tian had Lin Chen by his side, a child who was only 6 or 7 years old. At this moment, the eyes of the other people also trembled, but their eyes were extremely burning, as if they could see the scene of Nye Tian directly being crushed. However, in the next moment, an extremely strange scene occurred. Bang! In the void, a muffled sound rang out, and then a figure flew out several hundred meters, smashing heavily into a huge tree that was several meters thick, forcefully breaking the tree in half. Everyone's eyes trembled violently, and they all looked at the huge tree that had been smashed, shocked on the spot. Right beside the huge tree that had been broken, a figure stood trembling. His entire body was dripping with blood, and his face was as pale as a sheet of paper. This person was none other than Ling Yusong. The disciples of the Divine Wind sect finally reacted after watching for a long time, and they cried out in shock, Senior Brother Ling. They never thought that Ling Yusong would actually be directly sent flying, and he was even heavily injured. What happened just now? What was going on? Suddenly Ling Yusong spoke, looking at Nye Tian in shock, his expression extremely terrified. How can your aura be so strong? In that instant just now, the two of them had clashed with their auras. And the result was very obvious. Nye Tian's aura crushed Ling Yusong. Ling Yusong couldn't imagine that a peak over god martial artist's aura would actually be so powerful. You're a genius? Nye Tianling looked coldly at Ling Yusong, the corner of his mouth raised into an undisguised mocking smile, and he said, Unfortunately, a genius like you is even inferior to a trash like me. Tell me, don't you think you're ridiculous? Ling Yusong opened his mouth to say something, but he felt a tightness in his chest, and a mouthful of dirty blood sprayed out. He was completely in a mess now, and he didn't know what to say. He was indeed a genius of the Divine Wind sect, but this genius was completely crushed in front of Nye Tian. Big brother Nye Tian, you. At this time, Ouyang Yufei was also shocked. She looked at him with a shocked face and didn't know what to say. Originally, she was worried that Nye Tian would be injured by Ling Yusong. Now it seemed that she was worried about the wrong person. The person she really needed to worry about was Ling Yusong. Miss Yufei, thank you for your kindness just now. We'll take our leave. Nye Tian smiled at Ouyang Yufei, then left with Lin Chen. With his strength, the instant the three great forbidden techniques were activated, he could directly kill Ling Yusong with the pressure of his aura. However, he didn't do so, which could be considered as giving Ouyang Yufei face. However, Ling Yusong had gone all out just now, and the look in his eyes was clearly that he wanted to kill Nye Tian. Nye Tian didn't want to compete with an idiot, so he directly left. Ouyang Yufei and the other disciples of the Divine Wind sect looked at the backs of Nye Tian and Lin Chen. They were all stunned for a long time, and only reacted after a long time. Until now, they still felt as if they were in a dream, and they didn't dare to believe the scene just now. However, Ling Yusong had indeed been injured. This was not fake. Ling Yusong reacted and stared at Nye Tian viciously as he roared in his heart, Brat, let's wait and see. Following that, he sat cross-legged and began to slowly recover his strength. At the same time that Ling Yusong recovered his strength, the figures of Nye Tian and Lin Chen had already arrived outside a dense forest less than a kilometer away from the Thousand Demons Cave. Lin Chen was a little tired from walking, and he raised his head to look at Nye Tian and asked, Big brother Nye Tian, we're almost at the Thousand Demons Cave, right? Yes. Nye Tian nodded and said, After passing through this dense forest, we'll be able to see the entrance to the Thousand Demons Cave. That's great. Lin Chen shouted in surprise, and then he excitedly ran forward, wanting to enter the dense forest. Lin Chen, come back. Seeing this, Nye Tian's eyes trembled, and he directly reached out and pulled Lin Chen back. Buzz. However, right at this moment, a strange sound suddenly rang out from the void. Immediately after, a black streak of light appeared, whistling fiercely. Like a ferocious beast, it directly pounced towards Nye Tian and Lin Chen. Lightning Purple Heaven Battle Armor, activate. In an instant, Nye Tian reacted extremely quickly, and his entire body lit up with a layer of purple light, forming the lightning battle armor outside his body. Chapter 2186. Nye Tian and Lin Chen's figures streaked across the sky before landing steadily. That was close. Nie Tian steadied himself and saw that there was a crack on the lightning purple heaven battle armor. He could not help but suck in a breath of cold air as he spoke, still in a state of shock. That moment just now was too dangerous. If Nie Tian's reaction had been a little slower, that black light would not have struck the lightning purple heaven battle armor, but his and Lin Chen's bodies. Nie Tian's martial body was strong. Even if he was hit by the black light, he would at most be injured. There would not be any danger to his life. But Lin Chen was only a child who had not even awakened his origin spirit. If he was hit by the black light, he would die without a doubt. Big brother Nie Tian, what just happened? Lin Chen's little face was incomparably shocked. It was obvious that he was not lightly frightened. He raised his head and asked Nie Tian. It's a killing formation. Nie Tian looked at the dense forest in front of him and said solemnly. When he had just arrived, he could already see that there was a very powerful killing formation hidden in this dense forest. However, before he had time to speak, Lin Chen rushed over. The killing formation in this dense forest was more powerful and sensitive than Nie Tian had expected. Just now, Lin Chen was still a few dozen meters away from the dense forest when he directly triggered the killing formation. It was really dangerous. Killing formation? Lin Chen's eyes trembled. He appeared to be both surprised and puzzled. He asked, "What is it? Is it powerful?" "Very powerful." Nie Tian shook his head with a smile and did not explain too much. After all, Lin Chen was only a 7-year-old child. It was normal that he did not know what an array formation was. At this time, Nie Tian finally understood why Ling Yusong would say that without a divine array master and a sealing master, Nie Tian could not even find the entrance to the Thousand Demons Cave. Outside the Thousand Demons Cave, there were all kinds of killing formations. Without a divine array master and a sealing master following them, ordinary martial artists would not be able to avoid these killing formations. Almost everyone who entered the Thousand Demons Cave appeared in a team. In a team, there must be a divine array master and a sealing master. Moreover, there must be at least 2 of them, with one as a backup. Nie Tian wasn't unfamiliar with formations and restrictions, but he also didn't have much attainment in them. Thus, it was impossible for him to enter the Thousand Demons Cave on his own. Fortunately, he was accompanied by a fellow who was a grandmaster of both arrays and seals, Fat Cat. Nie Tian, give me some time. I will provide you with the safest route. At this moment there was no need for Nie Tian to speak. Fat Cat's voice rang out, chuckling and speaking confidently. The Burial Cloud mountain range was the battlefield of the Sage era. Hence, the killing arrays here were all extremely powerful. However, because too much time had passed, these killing formations had become much weaker. Thus, it was very easy to find a gap in them. Of course, Nie Tian believed in Fat Cat's strength. Thus, he wasn't anxious and waited quietly at the side. At this moment, many people in the surroundings had already slowly entered the dense forest. Most of the teams were able to pass through smoothly. However, there were some teams who took the wrong path in the dense forest and triggered the killing arrays, resulting in a tragic death. The Thousand Demons Cave is indeed a dangerous place, Nie Tian mumbled as he looked at the dense forest in front of him. This dense forest wasn't very big, but it was unknown how many cultivators had died in it. Nie Tian, it's done. After a while, Fat Cat's voice rang out again. Following this, a light map appeared in Nie Tian's spiritual sense. It was the diagram of the entire formation in the dense forest. What was even more bizarre was that Fat Cat had used different colors to label the entire formation diagram, making it look very beautiful. Fat, I only need one route. Do you really need to deconstruct the entire formation? Nie Tian laughed. No wonder Fat Cat took so much time. Yes, I need it very much. Fat Cat laughed strangely and said, Nie Tian, haven't you noticed? There's a group of people behind you. They've been standing there for a long time. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, but his expression didn't change much. he said. "I've noticed them for a long time. Is there a problem?" At this moment, there was a group of cultivators behind Nyetian. It seemed to be a team of about 30 to 40 people. These people stood in the same place for a long time without moving. Of course, Nyetian noticed them. However, these people didn't do anything and seemed very calm, so he didn't pay much attention to them. "Nyetian, do you think these people are here to enjoy the scenery?" Fat Cat laughed, a strange look in her eyes. Nyetian's expression flickered. He sent out his divine sense and found that these people were all late Paramount God. "Little fatty, are you saying that these people are here to kill me?" Nyetian couldn't help but become cautious upon this discovery, and he asked with a frown. "If they're not here to kill you, then are they here to visit you?" Fat Cat laughed strangely. "If they're here to kill me, then why aren't they attacking?" The corner of Nyetian's mouth twitched. He was a bit puzzled, but then he realized what was going on. "They're waiting for the right moment." "You're not that stupid after all." Fat Cat laughed. "They're waiting for you to enter the killing formation. Then they'll make their move." "Yeah." Nyetian nodded. He understood now. Earlier, he had run into a group of pursuers. Unfortunately, not only had they failed to kill Nyetian, but Nyetian had killed many of them instead. Therefore, these pursuers had become much smarter. After finding Nyetian, they didn't make a move. Instead, they waited for Nyetian to enter the killing formation. They wanted to kill Nyetian with the help of the killing spell formation in the dense forest. Nyetian had been careless, and hadn't noticed their plot. Fortunately, Fat Cat had been there, or he would have been in trouble. Little Fat Cat was very smart. It had drawn out the entire formation diagram of the forest, just so that when Nyetian entered the killing formation, he would have more routes to choose from. "If you want to play, then I'll play with you." Nyetian looked at the people behind him, his mouth curling into a cold smile. To ensure Lin Chen's safety, Nyetian asked him to enter the Superb's 9. Lin Chen was happy to do so, because he had discovered that there were many precious items in the Superb's 9, including Bab and a golden centipede. "Nyetian, it's all up to you now." Fat Cat chuckled. She was very confident in Nyetian. Nyetian agreed. After taking a deep breath, he no longer hesitated, and stepped into the dense forest's killing formation. At that moment, the dozens of cultivators behind him exchanged glances, then walked over and followed Nyetian into the dense forest's killing formation. Dozens of martial artists entered the killing formation at the same time, but none of them triggered the killing formation. It was obvious that there were divine array masters among them, and they were very familiar with the killing formation. The game has only just begun. Nyetian walked through the killing formation. His speed was not fast. Instead, he walked step by step. Chapter 2187. Suddenly, a figure charged toward Nyetian from within the killing formation. In the blink of an eye, he was less than 10 meters away from Nyetian. Whoosh! The man's eyes darkened, and without saying a word, he thrust his sword forward. However, his sword was not aimed at Nyetian, but at an area in the void. Nyetian's eyes narrowed. He could clearly see with his divine sense that the sword was pointing at a dangerous area marked with red light on the diagram of the formation. Clearly, this man was very familiar with the formation, and wanted to borrow the power of the killing formation to kill Nyetian. Unfortunately, Nyetian had the diagram of the formation in his divine sense, so he knew more about the killing formation than his opponent. In the next moment, Nyetian's figure flickered, and he dodged it nimbly. Just as he dodged, a beam of black light flashed past. If he had been any slower, he would have been hit by the black light. The black light from the killing formation didn't look very powerful, but it was powerful enough to kill a peak paramount god in an instant. That person couldn't help but exclaim in surprise when he saw that Nyetian had dodged the black light of the killing formation. But then, he stabbed out with his sword again. The sword split in two in the air, blasting in two different directions. His eyes flickered with cold, killing intent. He was very confident, as if he could already see the scene of Nye Tian being cut in half by the black light. In his opinion, Nye Tian had been lucky to dodge it just now. But this time, 2 killing formations had been triggered, and there was no way Nye Tian could dodge them. Nye Tian's lips curled into a smile, and he retreated half a meter to the side, deftly dodging the 2 beams of black light. How is this possible? The man couldn't hold it in any longer. He let out a strange cry, clearly very surprised. He hadn't expected Nye Tian to be able to dodge 2 killing formations at the same time. If it had been a coincidence the first time, then it definitely wasn't a coincidence this time. It was obvious that Nye Tian knew the killing formation like the back of his hand. Be careful, everyone. This kid is very familiar with killing formations. The man's eyes flickered, and he immediately shouted a warning to his companions. You are right. I am very familiar with killing formations. Nye Tian looked at the man, and a cold smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He chuckled and said, I really want to know how much you know about killing formations. As soon as he finished speaking, Nye Tian stabbed out with his sword. 3 rays of sword light whistled out at the same time, bombarding 3 different places. You! The man was struck dumb for a second, but soon realized what was going on. He screamed and retreated. However, at that moment, 3 rays of black light suddenly appeared in the void and attacked that person from different directions. The 3 streaks of black light came from different directions, from tricky angles, and were extremely fast. Even though that person was very familiar with killing formations, he did not have any chance to dodge the 3 black lights at the same time. At the critical moment, the man's toes tapped lightly, and his figure rose about 2 meters, avoiding the black light on his left and right. However, the black light above his head descended at this moment, directly splitting him in half. In the blink of an eye, blood gushed out. The scene was bloody. When the others saw this, their eyes trembled, as if they could not believe it. In the next moment, great fear appeared in their eyes. Only now did they realize that after entering the killing formation, it was not Nye Tian who had fallen into their trap, but they had fallen into Nye Tian's trap. Are you very afraid? Nye Tian's gaze swept across everyone, and the corners of his mouth curled up coldly. He said in a deep voice, Since you have come to me voluntarily, I will not show mercy. His voice was not loud, but it was extremely gloomy. The group of martial artists felt the murderous intent in Nye Tian's eyes at the same time, and instantly felt as if they had fallen into an ice cellar. It's time to end this. At that moment, Nye Tian smiled faintly and stabbed out with his starry sky slash. Instantly, hundreds of rays of sword light appeared, like dancing snakes, rushing towards the void. Nye Tian's mastery of sword intent had reached an extreme level. Next, each ray of sword light would trigger a black ray of killing formation. Run! In the next moment, someone reacted, and with a scream, he instantly retreated. Unfortunately, he was still 1 step too late. Swish! 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 In the blink of an eye, hundreds of rays of black light shot out from the killing formation, radiating the aura of a grim reaper as they attacked the dozens of martial artists. The dozens of late-stage paramount gods didn't even have time to react, and were instantly killed. The air was filled with a very strong smell of blood. The corner of Nye Tian's mouth twitched slightly, but there was no mercy in his eyes. Instead, he laughed. 30-some late-stage paramount gods. If they had killed me directly, they would have had a very good chance. Indeed, if those 30 people had attacked Nye Tian at the same time, they would have had a chance to kill Nye Tian. Unfortunately, they had been too stupid to wait for Nye Tian to enter the killing formation before making a move. Instead, they had become little sheep waiting to be slaughtered. Of course, Nye Tian didn't feel sorry for their death. They had come to kill Nye Tian, and if Nye Tian had shown them mercy, it would have been cruel to himself. In a world where the martial Tao reigned supreme, killing had never been a rare thing. Nye Tian had his own principles. He wouldn't take the initiative to kill people, but if someone tried to kill him, he wouldn't show mercy. Everyone else who saw what was happening in the killing formation was stunned, and couldn't speak for a long time. That was when Nye Tian saw a group of familiar faces standing outside the forest. It was Ouyang Yufei and the others. Clearly, Ouyang Yufei had seen everything that had just happened, and was staring at Nye Tian in shock. Especially Ling Yusong, whose eyes were as wide as saucers. If her eyes had been a little bigger, her eyeballs would have popped out of her head. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they would never have believed what they were seeing. Nye Tian had killed dozens of late paramount gods in the blink of an eye. That was too terrifying. All of a sudden, Ling Yusong felt that she was like a little lamb, and Nye Tian was a vicious wolf. Not long ago, he had been a little sheep who had recklessly provoked a vicious wolf. Only now did he realize that if Nye Tian had really wanted to kill him, even if he had 100 lives, he would still be a corpse by now. Just now, Ling Yusong had been thinking about revenge. But now, even if he had 10,000 gallbladders, he wouldn't even think about revenge. Compared to Nye Tian's current methods, that clash of auras just now was simply too merciful. Nye Tian hesitated for a moment, but then called out, "Miss Yufei, let's go together." Ouyang Yufei's beautiful eyes flickered, and she stared blankly for a few seconds. She hadn't expected that Nye Tian would take the initiative to call out to her. And just now, Ling Yusong had insulted Nye Tian. Ouyang Yufei couldn't help but look at Ling Yusong, who was nodding her head like a rattle drum. She completely agreed to go with Nye Tian. Yes, yes. Ouyang Yufei hurriedly nodded in agreement. Chapter 2188. Nye Tian's figure came to Ouyang Yufei and the others. He smiled faintly and said, "Miss Yufei, you can just follow behind me and follow my path." Ouyang Yufei nodded. Her beautiful eyes flickered. She seemed very nervous. She really didn't expect Nye Tian to be so powerful. The killing array was like nothing in front of him. Nye Tian, why? At this time, Ling Yusong hesitated for a long time and finally spoke. "Why can I walk so fast in the killing array?" Before Ling Yusong could finish, Nye Tian interrupted her and said with a faint smile, "Who told you that I don't have a divine array master or a sealing master by my side?" This. Ling Yusong was stunned and couldn't speak for a moment. She clearly saw that there was only Lin Chen beside Nye Tian. And Lin Chen was only a 6 or 7-year-old child. Obviously, he couldn't be a divine array master or a sealing master. Then, there was only one possibility. Nye Tian himself was both a divine array master and a sealing master. And looking at Nye Tian's familiarity with the killing array, he was obviously not a rookie array master, but a grandmaster array master. But how old was Nye Tian? Thinking of this, Ling Yusong was shocked to the extreme. His mouth was wide open, but he couldn't make a sound. Nye Tian saw what Ling Yusong was thinking and didn't explain. Instead, he smiled faintly at Ouyang Yufei and said, "Miss Yufei, follow me closely. Big brother Nye Tian, I will follow you closely." Ouyang Yufei nodded her head and spoke in a voice that was as low as a mosquito's. Her pretty face was inexplicably flushed red. Nye Tian didn't pay too much attention. His figure moved and stepped into the dense killing array, deliberately slowing down. Ouyang Yufei followed closely behind Nye Tian. She was careful and didn't dare to be careless. After a moment, Nye Tian and the others finally passed through the killing array. "I've finally made it." Ouyang Yufei patted her chest. Her chest was heaving up and down, and her forehead was covered in cold sweat. For Nye Tian, the dense forest killing array was not worth mentioning, but Ouyang Yufei was very careful as she walked, afraid that she would make a mistake. Ling Yusong and the others were also overjoyed. Although they did not say anything, their faces revealed gratitude. If not for Nye Tian, they would have been able to pass through the killing array, but it would definitely not have been so easy, and there might have been an accident. Is this the Thousand Demons Cave? At this moment, Nye Tian looked ahead and frowned. His expression was very ugly. In front of him was a huge mountain that stretched as far as the eye could see. It was tens of thousands of meters tall. Countless caves could be seen on the surface of the mountain. They looked like monsters with their mouths wide open, intent on devouring everything. When Ouyang Yufei saw Nie Tian's ugly expression, she could not help but take a step forward and ask softly, "Big brother Nie Tian, this is your first time coming to the Thousand Demons Cave, right?" "Yes." Nie Tian nodded. He did not expect the Thousand Demons Cave to be so magnificent. There were at least 8,000 caves of all sizes, if not 10,000. No wonder it was called the Thousand Demons Cave. There were so many caves, but Nie Tian could not see any difference at all. It was as if there was no difference in any cave he entered. He was here to find the space-time crystal element. If he entered every cave once, it would probably take dozens of years. He did not have so much time to waste. "Miss Yufei, are you familiar with the Thousand Demons Cave?" Nie Tian frowned, glanced at Ouyang Yufei, and asked. Ouyang Yufei seemed a little embarrassed. She shook her head, looked at Ling Yusong, and said, "I have never been to the Thousand Demons Cave, but senior brother Ling has been here many times. He is very familiar with the Thousand Demons Cave." Cough cough. When Ling Yusong heard Ouyang Yufei's words, she actually coughed twice, as if waiting for Nie Tian to speak. Nie Tian smiled faintly, not feeling embarrassed at all. He asked directly, "Brother Ling, since you are very familiar with the Thousand Demons Cave, then I'll have to trouble you to tell me about it." Ling Yusong was stunned. She did not expect Nie Tian to be so polite. She immediately put on a flattered expression and said quickly, "I have been to the Thousand Demons Cave 3 times. I am very familiar with it. The mountain range in front of us is called the Thousand Demons Mountain. The entire mountain is enveloped by a large array. According to rumors, these caves are the eyes of the array. In the entire Thousand Demon Mountain, there are a total of 8,612 caves. Each and every cave possesses an extremely mysterious restriction. All the cultivators that enter the caves will be restricted by the restrictions." As she spoke, Ling Yusong walked forward and pointed at the Thousand Demons Mountain. She said, "Brother Nye, look. When all these caves are connected, don't they look like huge rings?" Nie Tian looked around and nodded with a smile. When all the caves were connected, they formed huge rings. When all the rings were connected, they looked like layers of halos, faintly emitting a strange light. The Thousand Demons Mountain was enveloped by a large array. It was not strange that these caves could emit such an aura. Ling Yusong laughed, seemingly very pleased with herself. She continued, "These cave eyes are divided into a total of 9 rings. The closer the cave is to the outer ring, the weaker the restrictions. The closer the cave is to the center of the ring, the stronger the restrictions. For countless years, many genius cultivators have wanted to enter the Thousand Demons Cave to see what exactly is inside. However, the vast majority of the people who entered the Thousand Demons Cave died inside. Only an extremely small portion of people came out alive, but they did not bring anything out." Speaking up to this point, Ling Yusong paused for a while, seeming somewhat sad. This was because her elder brother had died in one of the caves of the Thousand Demons Cave. Since the Thousand Demons Cave is so dangerous, why are there still so many people wanting to enter? Nie Tian asked with a puzzled expression, frowning slightly. Because the Thousand Demons Cave is a huge treasure trove. In every cave there are natural treasures. Ling Yusong forced a smile. Then, he pointed to the outer ring of caves and said, "These outermost caves have already been ransacked by people. There's nothing left. However, very few people can enter the inner ring of caves, so there are definitely good things inside." Nie Tian smiled faintly and suddenly asked, "What layer of caves do you want to enter by coming to the Thousand Demons Cave?" Ling Yusong's gaze flickered and he smiled awkwardly. He said, "We are carrying out a sect mission. We only need to enter the outermost first layer of caves." The first layer of caves was the outermost cave. The restrictions were the weakest, and the danger was the lowest. Actually, the 3 times Ling Yusong came to the Thousand Demons Cave, he had entered the first layer of caves. It was just that he was embarrassed to say it. The first layer of caves is not dangerous, but the second layer of caves is very dangerous. As for the third layer of caves, very few people can enter it. Following that, Ling Yusong said, those who can enter the fourth layer of caves are existences that are as rare as phoenix feathers and qilin horns. As for the fifth layer of caves, basically only the peak geniuses of the Forsaken Land have the opportunity to enter it. As for the sixth layer of caves, in the entire history of the Forsaken Land, not many people have entered it. So terrifying! When Nye Tian heard Ling Yusong's words, his gaze involuntarily sank. He did not expect the Thousand Demons Cave's restrictions to be so strong. Chapter 2189. Hearing what Ling Yusong said, Nye Tian's expression couldn't help but become much more serious. He really didn't think that a small Thousand Demons Cave would be so strange. The Thousand Demons Cave had more than 8,000 caves, divided into 9 layers. The first layer's cave restrictions were the weakest, and the 9th layer's cave restrictions were the strongest. But according to Ling Yusong, it seemed that those who could enter the 6th layer were already world-shocking existences, and in the entire history of the Forsaken Land, there were only a few. Didn't that mean that no one had entered the 7th layer to the 9th layer before? Nye Tian took a look. There were hundreds of caves from the 7th layer to the 9th layer added together. There were so many caves, but no one had ever entered them. No one knew what was hidden in them. At this time, Nye Tian really couldn't hold back his curiosity and asked with a faint smile, "Brother Ling, I want to know if anyone has entered the 7th layer and the deeper layers before." Hearing Nye Tian's question, Ling Yusong couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Then, she shook her head with certainty and said, "The peak geniuses of the Forsaken Land have at most entered the 6th layer. As for the 7th layer and the deeper layers, no one has ever entered before." Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly and then he asked, "Doesn't that mean that no one knows what's in the 7th layer and the deeper layers?" "Yes." Ling Yusong nodded heavily, and then she noticed that Nye Tian's gaze was a little strange. It was actually flickering with a blazing light, as if he was eager to try. Sensing this, Ling Yusong's expression couldn't help but change, and she exclaimed, "Brother Nye, you can't be thinking of entering those inner layers of caves, right? Since I'm here, of course I have to give it a try." Nye Tian smiled faintly, but didn't say which layer of caves he wanted to enter. At this time, Ouyang Yufei's beautiful eyes flickered, and she asked with a shocked expression, "Big brother Nye Tian, you can't be thinking of entering the 2nd layer of caves, right?" In her opinion, being able to come to the Thousand Demons Cave was already very amazing. Entering the 1st layer of caves meant great danger, and the 2nd layer of caves was even more dangerous. She thought that Nye Tian wanted to enter the 2nd layer of the cave. Nye Tian smiled faintly and shook his head, but he did not say anything. Upon seeing Nye Tian shake his head, Ouyang Yufei couldn't help but sigh in relief. She nodded and said, "Since big brother Nye Tian doesn't want to enter the 2nd layer, then let's go to the 1st layer." Nye Tian looked at Ouyang Yufei and said, "Miss Yufei, to tell you the truth, the reason I came to the Thousand Devils Cave this time is to find something very important. Since the 1st layer of the cave has already been ransacked, I don't think there's a need to enter." When Ouyang Yufei saw Nye Tian's serious expression, she couldn't help but blush and lower her head. "Brother Nye, what are you looking for?" Ling Yusong suddenly asked. "Space-time crystal essence." Nye Tian didn't hide it and nodded. Space-time crystal essence. Upon hearing Nye Tian's words, Ling Yusong and Ouyang Yufei exclaimed at the same time and looked at Nye Tian in disbelief. The others were also shocked, and they could not hide the fear in their eyes. Seeing everyone's reaction, Nye Tian couldn't help but be stunned and asked, "What's wrong with you guys?" Ling Yusong was stunned for a few seconds before she reacted. She looked at Nye Tian with a solemn face and said in a heavy voice, "Brother Nye, you're not joking, are you? Are you really looking for spacetime crystal essence? Already? Is there a problem?" Nye Tian's eyes slightly narrowed and he asked, "Is there no spacetime crystal essence in the Thousand Devils Cave?" The news that there were spacetime crystal essence in the Thousand Devils Cave was told to Nye Tian by the mysterious man, so it shouldn't be wrong. Ling Yusong was stunned and didn't know what to say for a while. "Brother Ling, if there's something you want to say, just say it." Nye Tian slightly frowned and said directly. Ling Yusong let out a long breath and finally calmed down a lot. She said, "Brother Nye, I really don't know how to tell you. The Thousand Devils Cave does have spacetime crystal essence, but spacetime crystal essence is a treasure that maintains the stability of spacetime. Even in the Forsaken Land, spacetime crystal essence is a very precious thing. Countless people from major forces have come to the Thousand Devils Cave to look for spacetime crystal essence, but they all returned in vain. Why?" Hearing this, Nye Tian couldn't help but frown and ask. "Because the spacetime crystal essence is in the 5th layer of the cave." Ling Yusong's expression became much more solemn. There are very few cultivators who can enter the 5th layer of the cave, and those who can come out alive are even fewer. Many major forces have lost countless genius disciples for the spacetime crystal essence. Saying this, Ling Yusong couldn't help but look at Nye Tian and sincerely said, "Brother Nye, I know that your strength and talent are top-notch, but if you want to obtain the spacetime crystal essence by yourself, it's impossible." At this moment, Ling Yusong's words weren't because he looked down on Nye Tian, but because he really believed that Nye Tian had no chance of obtaining the spacetime crystal essence. It was precisely because of this reason that Ling Yusong and the others were very surprised. It was hard to imagine that Nye Tian had come to the Thousand Devils Cave alone for the spacetime crystal essence. It was simply too inconceivable. If he didn't already know of Nye Tian's heaven-defying strength, Ling Yusong would definitely think that the former was an idiot. So that's how it is. After listening to Ling Yusong, Nye Tian smiled faintly and said, "It seems that I've taken this matter too lightly. Brother Nye, let me give you a word of advice." Ling Yusong nodded and said solemnly, "If you really want the spacetime crystal essence, you should first find a powerful force to rely on. That way, you might be able to obtain it." "Thank you for your advice." Nye Tian smiled faintly and said with a carefree expression, "Since I'm already here, of course I have to give it a try. Maybe I'll be lucky and succeed." "Big brother Nye Tian, you." Hearing that Nye Tian wanted to give it a try, Ouyang Yufei's small face stiffened. She looked at Nye Tian and was speechless. The spacetime crystal essence was in the 5th layer of the cave. It was simply unimaginable how dangerous it was inside. If Nye Tian gave it a try, he would simply be using his own life as a joke. Ouyang Yufei knew that Nye Tian's strength and talent were terrifying, but the 5th layer of the cave was really not a joke. "Thank you for worrying for me, but this is what I have to do. I can't give up." Nye Tian looked at Ouyang Yufei and smiled faintly. His eyes were extremely firm. Ouyang Yufei still wanted to say something, but she could feel the determination in Nye Tian's eyes, so she swallowed the words that were about to come out. Nye Tian nodded slightly and prepared to bid farewell to Ouyang Yufei and the others and immediately try to enter the 5th layer of the cave. But at this moment, his eyes involuntarily narrowed, as if he had sensed something. Chapter 2190. Sensing a powerful aura behind him, Nye Tian looked over his shoulder to see a burly middle-aged man staring at him with a pair of abstruse eyes. He pulsed with a powerful aura, making it obvious that he was a peak paramount god. From his aura, Nye Tian could tell that this man's battle prowess was no weaker than the top experts of the 9 realms. However, he was far from the half-sage level. "Master!" Right at this moment, Ling Yusong reacted and let out a strange cry. Then, she directly knelt down in fear and trepidation. "Teacher!" When Nye Tian heard how Ling Yusong addressed the person, he couldn't help but narrow his eyes. "Greetings, Sect Lord," the other disciples of the Divine Wind Sect said, dropping to their knees as well. "Sect Master?" Upon hearing this title, Nye Tian was taken aback once again. "Father!" Right at that moment, Ouyang Yufei suddenly stepped forward and called out in a low voice. Nye Tian's jaw dropped, and his expression darkened as he realized who the newcomer was. It was none other than Ling Yusong's master, the Sect Lord of the Divine Wind Sect, and Ouyang Yufei's father, Ouyang Chuan. Following that, a few more martial artists appeared and stood behind Ouyang Chuan. Nye Tian glanced at them and saw a familiar face. It was none other than Sun Zhangqi, an elder of the Divine Wind Sect. It was at this point that he realized why Ouyang Chuan had come. Ouyang Chuan was also staring at Nye Tian, looking him up and down with increasing surprise. "Father, why are you here?" Ouyang Yufei asked, sensing that Ouyang Chuan was looking at Nye Tian in a strange way. "I'm here for him," Ouyang Chuan said coolly, his mouth curling into a smile, his eyes locked onto Nye Tian. Ouyang Yufei, Ling Yusong, and the others all stared in shock, not knowing what was going on. Could it be that there was a connection between Nye Tian and the Divine Wind Sect? "Sect Lord, it's him," Sun Zhangqi said, taking a step forward and glaring coldly at Nye Tian. "Our Divine Wind Sect lost hundreds of disciples trying to capture the Pishio. Not only did this kid take away the Pishio, he even cut off one of my arms. Our Divine Wind Sect has never suffered such humiliation in the Burial Cloud mountain range. Sect leader, please uphold justice for us and kill this brat." As he finished speaking, Sun Zhangqi's eyes were piercingly cold, and he wished for nothing more than to tear Nye Tian into pieces. "What?" Ling Yusong and Ouyang Yufei were stunned. They turned to look at Sun Zhangqi and realized that he was missing an arm. Seeing this scene, the two of them were shocked. How could they have imagined that Nye Tian had actually broken one of Sun Zhangqi's arms? Sun Zhangqi was an elder of the Godwind Sect, a peak paramount god. Exactly how strong was Nye Tian's battle prowess? But at this time, Ouyang Chuan didn't care about Sun Zhangqi's anger at all. He laughed and asked, "Sun Zhangqi, are you sure you didn't get the wrong person?" "No, absolutely not. The person who broke my arm is definitely this brat." Sun Zhangqi was stunned for a moment, then he nodded heavily and said, "Nye Tian had severed his arm with a single move. How could he be mistaken?" "If you're not mistaken, then what's with his strength?" Ouyang Chuan frowned and said cold, "You said that the person who injured you was a late paramount god, but he was only a peak over god. This..." Sun Zhangqi was taken aback. Only now did he realize that Nye Tian was only a peak over god. He stood there in a daze, a look of confusion on his face. When he had fought Nye Tian, the latter was clearly a late paramount god. How could he be a peak over god now? What was going on? Sun Zhangqi couldn't understand. A person who's only a peak over god killed the Grand Elder of the Blue Dragon Sect in a single strike. Should I believe that? Ouyang Chuan smiled strangely, his eyes roaming over Nye Tian, as if he were looking for something. As his voice fell, Ling Yusong, Ouyang Yufei, and the others were petrified. If they hadn't heard wrong, Ouyang Chuan said that Nye Tian had killed the Grand Elder of the Blue Dragon Sect with a single move. Ling Yusong and the others knew how powerful the Grand Elder of the Blue Dragon Sect was. Even if he wasn't as strong as Ouyang Chuan, he wasn't too far off. Nye Tian had killed the Grand Elder of the Blue Dragon Sect with a single move. That was just too ridiculous. "Sect Master." At this time, Sun Zhangqi reacted and said with a trembling voice, "This brat really killed Lu Jinyuan. This is absolutely true. This subordinate saw it with his own eyes." "Is that so?" Ouyang Chuan sneered, then raised an eyebrow and said to Nye Tian, "Young man, you haven't said anything. Are you feeling guilty?" "Guilty? Why would I feel guilty?" Nye Tian smiled faintly. "I was the one who took the Pishio," cut off Elder Sun's arm, and killed the Grand Elder of the Blue Dragon sect. I'm the one who did all these things. Do you think there's a problem? Ouyang Chuan looked at Nie Tian and felt the calmness in the latter's eyes. He couldn't help but be shocked. This brat, he can actually remain so calm in front of me. His mind is really strong. Brat, you said that you did all these things. Why should I believe you? Ouyang Chuan sneered and said in a deep voice. Do I need you to believe me? Nie Tian laughed and asked, whether you believe me or not is your business. What does it have to do with me? Ouyang Chuan frowned. He didn't expect Nie Tian to dare to talk to him in this manner. Brat, watch your attitude. The person talking to you right now is the sect master of the Wind God sect. Sun Zhangqi roared angrily. Nie Tian glanced at him coldly and said, be it the sect master of the Wind God sect or a street vendor, they're all human beings. There's no difference in my eyes. Besides, I'm not from the Wind God sect. Do I need to speak in such a humble manner? You. Sun Zhangqi's eyes trembled. He felt a tightness in his chest and couldn't say a word. Ouyang Chuan laughed and said, young man, you're right. We don't know each other and there's no relationship between us. There's no need for you to be so respectful in front of me. However, I hate liars the most. Ouyang Chuan suddenly changed the topic and his face darkened. He said coldly, with your strength, it's impossible for you to kill the Grand Elder of the Blue Dragon sect. This sect leader wants to see just how capable you are. As soon as he finished speaking, Ouyang Chuan's aura suddenly skyrocketed. His face darkened and the corner of his mouth curled into a cold smile. Then, a huge pressure pressed down on Nie Tian like a raging wave. Father, don't! Almost at the same time, Ouyang Yufei's beautiful eyes trembled and she screamed. She never thought that Ouyang Chuan would suddenly attack Nie Tian. Unfortunately, it was too late. Chapter 2191. Ouyang Chuan's aura was extremely terrifying. When it was completely released, it was like a ferocious beast, causing the surrounding space to tremble. At this moment, everyone's eyes trembled violently. They were extremely shocked, as if they could already see a bloody scene. In their opinion, there was no way Nie Tian could withstand Ouyang Chuan's aura. Boom! However, in the next moment, strange black runes suddenly appeared around Nie Tian's body, and his aura instantly skyrocketed to the extreme. A sword aura suddenly rose, like a flood dragon breaking out of the abyss, abnormally powerful. Rumble! In the void, the two auras collided, causing a violent explosion. Then, endless waves of energy exploded in the air, spreading in all directions. Then, an unbelievable scene happened. Bang! Bang! Two muffled sounds rang out. Ouyang Chuan was actually forced to take 2 steps back. In the next moment, the waves of energy in the air dispersed, and Nie Tian's figure appeared. He was standing in the same place, as steady as a mountain. This! Everyone's eyes trembled violently, and they all sucked in a breath of cold air. The shock in their hearts was written all over their faces. To them, the scene in front of them was simply impossible. Under the pressure of Ouyang Chuan's aura, not only was Nie Tian not injured at all, but he had even forced Ouyang Chuan to take 2 steps back. This was just too terrifying. It wasn't just the others. Even Ouyang Chuan himself was stunned on the spot. His face was stiff, and he couldn't say anything for a long time. He had never thought that Nie Tian would actually be able to break through his aura. What was even stranger was that the moment Nie Tian's sword aura surged, he actually felt a very real threat. A peak-over god was actually able to threaten him, the sect leader of the Wind God sect. Was this really not a dream? Sect leader Ouyang, you're underestimating me too much if you think you can defeat me with your aura. At this moment Nie Tian spoke. He looked at Ouyang Chuan indifferently and said in a cold voice, Now, I'd like to ask you, sect leader Ouyang, do you believe what I just said? At his peak, Nie Tian was no weaker than an ordinary peak paramount god. The other party had to be at least a half-saint in order to defeat him with his aura alone. Unfortunately, Ouyang Chuan's strength was far from reaching the level of a half-step saint. Ouyang Chuan was confident in his strength, but in the end, he lifted a rock and smashed his own foot. Finally, Ouyang Yufei reacted. She came to Ouyang Chuan's side and asked nervously, "Father, are you okay?" Ouyang Chuan's face reddened in embarrassment, but he soon forced a smile and brought his fists together towards Nie Tian. "Little brother, your strength has indeed exceeded my expectations. This sect master believes your words just now." When the others saw Ouyang Chuan's actions, they couldn't help being stunned. Although Ouyang Chuan didn't say any words of apology, his actions were clearly an apology to Nie Tian. It was as if in his eyes, Nie Tian's status had suddenly risen by a lot, and the two of them were actually on equal footing. Sun Zhangqi was so shocked that his eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. He had hoped that Ouyang Chuan would avenge him, but Ouyang Chuan was clearly trying to curry favor with Nie Tian. There was no sign that he was going to get revenge. Ouyang Chuan's current attitude was almost subservient. Sun Zhangqi didn't understand why Ouyang Chuan was doing this. Even if Nie Tian had broken through Ouyang Chuan's pressure, that didn't mean he was a match for Ouyang Chuan. If Ouyang Chuan went all out, he could still kill Nie Tian in one move. So why was he taking the initiative to express goodwill to Nie Tian? "It's good that you believe me, sect master," Nie Tian said with a faint smile. Of course he could tell that Ouyang Chuan was expressing goodwill. Ouyang Chuan smiled and bowed slightly. "How should I address you, little brother?" "There's no need to be so polite, sect master Ouyang. I'm a friend of Miss Yufei's. You can call me Nie Tian." Nie Tian nodded slightly. As the saying goes, one doesn't hit a smiling person. Since Ouyang Chuan was taking the initiative, he had to show his gratitude. Taking the initiative to say that he was Ouyang Yufei's friend was actually to get closer to Ouyang Chuan. "Little friend Nie Tian." Ouyang Chuan smiled faintly. He was very smart and said directly, "There was some misunderstanding between you and the Wind God sect, but it's all in the past. Let's forget about it. I accidentally injured your sect's Elder Sunday. If sect master Ouyang can let bygones be bygones, of course I can accept it." Nie Tian smiled faintly. "That's good." Ouyang Chuan nodded and smiled. Suddenly, his eyes flashed and he transmitted his voice to Nie Tian. "Little friend Nie Tian, to be honest, I acted rashly just now. I didn't want to hurt you. I just wanted to test your strength." "I know." Nie Tian smiled faintly and transmitted his voice as well. "Sect Master Ouyang, what's the matter? Just say it." In fact, when Ouyang Chuan had just arrived, Nie Tian had already determined that the former was not here to kill him. Everything Ouyang Chuan had done just now was to verify Nie Tian's talent. If he wanted to kill Nie Tian, he could have done it directly. There was no need to say so much nonsense and play so many tricks. Moreover, Nie Tian could see that Ouyang Chuan had something to ask of him. Just when Ouyang Chuan was forced to take 2 steps back by Nie Tian felt that there was a very cold energy in the former's body, as if it wanted to freeze his meridians. "Little friend Nie Tian, you want to enter the 5th layer of the cave, right?" Ouyang Chuan looked at Nie Tian with fiery eyes and continued to transmit his voice. "I want to ask you to help me take something." As expected. Hearing Ouyang Chuan's words, Nie Tian smiled inwardly and said, "What does sect master Ouyang want me to take?" "The rheumatism jade." Ouyang Chuan's eyes trembled as he said, "It's on the 5th layer, in the 13th cave." Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. He did not expect Ouyang Chuan to be so familiar with the Thousand Demons cave that he knew what was in one of the caves on the 5th layer. However, he did not ask too many questions. Instead, he laughed and said, "Sect Master Ouyang, you want to use the rheumatism jade to treat the cold energy in your body, right? How did you know?" Ouyang Chuan's eyes trembled violently. It was obvious that he was quite surprised. He did not expect that Nye Tian could see that he had the cold energy in his body. To tell you the truth, the cold energy in my body is called the seven evils in chill. It is a hidden injury left behind by an enemy many years ago. After hesitating for a while, Ouyang Chuan still said, the seven evils in chill is extremely cold. I have been tortured by this cold energy for over 100 years. Now, I can no longer suppress the power of the seven evils in chill. I need to use the heat energy of the rheumatism jade in order to suppress it. Without the rheumatism jade, I'm afraid I won't be able to keep my life. Saying this, Ouyang Chuan's expression became more serious. For 100 years, he had been tortured by the seven evils in chill. This feeling was worse than death. Originally, he had come here to kill Nye Tian. However, when he heard that Nye Tian wanted to enter the 5th layer of the cave, he changed his mind. He knew that in the 13th cave on the 5th layer, there was the rheumatism jade that could suppress the seven evils in chill. Therefore, he asked Nye Tian to help him obtain the rheumatism jade. Chapter 2192. After listening to Ouyang Chuan, Nye Tian smiled faintly and said, Sect leader Ouyang, according to what you said, your current state is already on the verge of death, and you urgently need the rheumatism jade to save your life. I can help you get the rheumatism jade, but I want to ask, why should I do that? Ouyang Chuan was slightly stunned, and his eyes flickered. Of course, he understood what Nye Tian meant. The latter was asking for conditions. Nye Tian, my young friend, what do you want? After a while, Ouyang Chuan glanced at Nye Tian, then turned his gaze to Ouyang Yufei, as if he wanted to say something, but didn't. Nye Tian looked at Ouyang Chuan and couldn't help but smile in his heart. It was obvious that the other party had misunderstood. Ouyang Chuan saw that Nye Tian was asking for conditions, but didn't say it directly, so he thought that the latter was interested in Ouyang Yufei. Moreover, Nye Tian had just said that he was Ouyang Yufei's friend. Sect leader Ouyang, you misunderstood me. Miss Yufei and I are friends, just friends. Nye Tian smiled faintly and no longer hesitated. He directly said, Sect leader Ouyang, I'm very curious. How do you know that there is a rheumatism jade in the 5th floor's 13th cave? Ling Yusong had already told Nye Tian that it was very rare for people to enter the 5th floor's cave. However, Ouyang Chuan seemed to know the 5th floor's caves very well, which was very strange. Ouyang Chuan frowned, and his expression was a little awkward. Obviously, there was something he didn't want to say. Sect leader Ouyang, since you asked for my help, we are in a cooperative relationship. I think, as a cooperative partner, you should at least trust me. Nye Tian smiled faintly, looking very relaxed. Ouyang Chuan's gaze swept over Nye Tian. After a long moment of hesitation, he finally said, Nye Tian, my young friend, to tell you the truth, I have a treasure map that leads to the 1,000 Demons Cave. The 1,000 Demons Cave's treasure map. Hearing Ouyang Chuan's words, Nye Tian's eyes narrowed, and he almost screamed. The 1,000 Demons Cave was a cave in the 7th layer. No one had ever entered it before. Thus, no one knew what was hidden inside. But Ouyang Chuan actually had a treasure map related to the 1,000 Devils Cave. This was truly too astonishing. The value of this treasure map was simply immeasurable. Little friend Nye Tian, don't be too excited. When Ouyang Chuan saw Nye Tian's expression, he laughed bitterly and said, The 1,000 Demon Cave treasure map in my hands is only a fragment and not complete. Nye Tian frowned as he glanced at Ouyang Chuan. The latter did not seem to be lying. Nye Tian, my young friend, this treasure map is an heirloom of my Wind God sect. It's not my personal property, so Ouyang Chuan looked at Nye Tian and said, Sect leader Ouyang, don't worry. I'm not interested in your treasure map. Nye Tian naturally understood Ouyang Chuan's meaning. He smiled lightly and said, But I want to ask you something. Please tell me. Little friend Nye Tian, please ask away. Hearing that Nye Tian did not want the treasure map, Ouyang Chuan let out a sigh of relief and hurriedly nodded in agreement. Sect Leader Ouyang, I want to know, which cave has the space-time crystal element? Nie Tian smiled and asked the first question. Space-time crystal element. Ouyang Chuan's eyes flickered. He thought for a while and said, the fifth layer, cave number 17. Are you sure? Nie Tian's lips curled up as he asked again. I'm sure. Ouyang Chuan nodded heavily. He had already memorized the treasure map fragment, so it was impossible for him to remember it wrongly. Good, second question. Nie Tian nodded. Immediately afterwards, his expression grew serious as he asked, Sectmaster Ouyang, do you have any information about Dragon Spring Veins on your treasure map? Dragon Spring Vein? Ouyang Chuan was startled when he heard these words. He shook his head and said, no. Nie Tian let out a wry smile, feeling a little helpless. The Dragon Spring Vein was hidden by Sacred Lord Xianlong, so it was normal that the treasure map fragment didn't record it. But if that was the case, things would be a little troublesome. Nie Tian didn't know which cave Lin Chen's brother and his clansmen had entered. How was he going to find them? Let's not think about that for now. Let's settle the matter in front of us first. Nie Tian shook his head and didn't think too much about it. Now that he knew the exact location of the spacetime crystal element, the next step was to enter the cave and search for it. Things seemed to be progressing very smoothly. Little friend Nie Tian, which cave do you want to enter next? At this time, Ouyang Chuan's eyes flickered as he suddenly asked. On the 5th floor, the 13th cave had the rheumatism jade, and the 17th cave had the spacetime crystal element. Nie Tian wanted to enter both. Of course, Ouyang Chuan hoped that Nie Tian would enter the 13th cave and obtain the rheumatism jade for him. Sect Leader Ouyang, rest assured. I'm a man of my word. Since I've already promised you, I won't go back on my words. Nie Tian smiled faintly as he looked at the 1,000 Devil Mountain with a fiery gaze. At this time, in the air outside the 1,000 Devil Mountain, many cultivators were standing in the air, trying to enter the 1,000 Devil Cave. Most people chose to enter the first and second layer of the cave. Only a small number of people tried to enter the third and fourth layer. As for the fifth layer, basically no one tried it. Nie Tian saw that many cultivators, before they could even enter the cave, were bounced back by the powerful restrictive qi. Some people even died under the power of the restrictive qi. Let me try as well. Nie Tian's lips curved into a smile as he mumbled. He was ready to give it a try. Nie Tian, little friend, you can start from the second layer and feel the strength of the restrictive qi. Ouyang Chuan was a little worried and suggested to Nie Tian. Nie Tian smiled. His silhouette flickered and he leapt into the air, arriving outside the 5th layer in an instant. This. Ouyang Chuan saw where Nie Tian was and couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Is he planning to enter the 5th layer directly? The others were also looking at Nie Tian with astonishment on their faces. In their eyes, Nie Tian trying to enter the 5th layer directly was too crazy. The restrictive qi of the 5th layer was extremely terrifying. In the entire abandoned land, there weren't many cultivators who could enter the 5th layer. At this moment, Nie Tian stood in the air, staring at the cave in front of him with a fiery gaze. Only now did he discover that each and every cave was marked with a number. These numbers were obviously left behind by someone. Nie Tian frowned as he thought to himself, don't tell me that this 1,000 Demons mountain range was created by someone. Nie Tian, the mountain in front of you is protected by a gigantic formation. At this moment, Fat Cat's voice rang out, reminding Nie Tian, the restrictive qi of the formation is extremely strong, it's definitely a saint-level restrictive qi. These restrictive qi tests the cultivator's talent and willpower. You must be careful, don't force yourself. I know. Nie Tian lightly nodded. Immediately after, a pair of astral soul wings appeared on his back. With a flap of his wings, he dashed towards the 13th cave in the 5th layer. Chapter 2193. Nie Tian, who was in mid-air, suddenly frowned when he felt a terrifying pressure coming from behind him. His reaction was extremely quick. In the blink of an eye, he activated the 3 forbidden techniques in his body, causing his aura to skyrocket as he lashed out with his sword. Bang! Rumbling sword intents roared in the air, forming a 3,000-meter-long sword shadow that slashed forward. Boom! The next moment, the illusionary dragon claw collided with the sword shadow, resulting in a terrifying sound as the sword shadow shattered into pieces. In the next moment, the illusory dragon claw smashed directly towards Nie Tian. Watch out! In the blink of an eye, Fat Cat screamed as the aura of death approached. The strength of the attacker was obviously stronger than Nie Tian. It was impossible for Nie Tian to resist the attack. At the same time, Nie Tian could feel a tremendous force approaching him, causing his eyes to shudder. The incoming force was too terrifying. The destructive aura was enough to kill Nie Tian straight away. Violet Lightning Battle Armor, activate. Shield of the Divine God of Battle, activate. 3 Seals of the Divine God of Battle. Flowing Killing Seal, Destroying Earth Seal, and Annihilating Soul Seal, activate. 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 In the face of life and death, Nie Tian reacted decisively. His aura skyrocketed as his aura surged in the air. Layers of battle armor, shields, and powerful seals were activated in an instant. His body was encapsulated by streams of energy, which resembled colorful rays of light flowing around his body. At that instant, a surprised voice could be heard in the sky, which was followed by a cold laugh. Little brat, you sure have some tricks up your sleeves. Unfortunately, no matter how many life-saving methods you have, it's useless in front of me. The voice was cold and filled with murderous intent. Boom! As soon as the voice was heard, the illusionary dragon claw landed on Qin Nan, causing the air to tremble violently as a terrifying explosion took place. Bang! 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 Immediately after, a series of tearing sounds rang out. The terrifying phantom of the dragon claw directly broke through Nie Tian's defense. High up in the sky, the light around him grew dimmer and dimmer. Bang! In the end, a muffled sound was heard as the illusory dragon claw struck Nie Tian's body. His entire body was sent flying like a kite with a broken string. Under countless gazes, Nie Tian's figure streaked across the sky, leaving a trail of blood behind him. But in the next moment, the strangest thing happened. Pooh! The crimson figure in the air actually pierced through the restrictive barrier of the 5th floor's 13th cave. It was as if he had torn through a layer of paper and directly entered the cave. This! Everyone's eyes widened and they gasped as if they had seen a ghost. Everything happened in the blink of an eye, but everyone could clearly see a figure being blasted into a cave on the 5th floor with a single move. How powerful was the restrictive power of the 5th layer? It was simply unimaginable. Who would have thought that someone actually entered the 5th layer's cave in such a way? Everyone in the surroundings stared dumbfoundedly at the huge cliff of the Thousand Demons Mountain. The entire place fell into a dead silence. There was no sound for a long time. How is this possible? After a long time, a black-clothed figure appeared high up in the sky. He was also looking at a cave in shock. His face was conflicted like a blooming chrysanthemum. This black-clothed figure was the person who suddenly attacked Nie Tian. What's going on? That brat entered the 5th layer's cave just like that? The black-clothed figure was speechless. He was simply doubting his own eyes. Originally, he wanted to kill Nie Tian with one palm. He did not expect that the latter would be slapped into the 5th layer's cave with one palm. Is he not dead? The black-clothed figure frowned, and his expression was very embarrassed. Nie Tian entered the 5th layer's cave. This undoubtedly meant that he was still alive. A dead person had no talent to speak of. It was impossible for him to enter the Thousand Demons cave. It's you, Sima Lianzhao. Just as the black-clothed figure was embarrassed, a furious voice rang out, directly shouting the black-clothed figure's name. Then, a figure shot into the sky and confronted Sima Lianzhao. Sima Lianzhao. He's the sect leader of the Blue Dragon sect. The crowd exclaimed when they heard this name. No wonder this person was so strong. He was the sect leader of the Blue Dragon sect. The person confronting Sima Lianzhao was none other than the sect leader of the Wind God sect, Ouyang Chuan. Everything happened in an instant. Ouyang Chuan did not expect that Sima Lianzhao would suddenly appear and attack Nie Tian. If he had known all this, he would definitely have stopped Sima Lianzhao. Ouyang Chuan, what are you doing? Sima Lianzhao frowned and asked Ouyang Chuan coldly when he sensed the latter's monstrous anger. Sima Lianzhao, why do you want to kill him? Ouyang Chuan's eyes were bloodshot as he roared. Although he knew that Nie Tian might still be alive, Sima Lianzhao had attacked him head-on. Even if he managed to enter the 5th floor of the cave, he would still die. That kid killed the first elder of the Blue Dragon sect. Isn't it normal for me to kill him? Sima Lianzhao was startled for a moment before he said, Ouyang Chuan, as far as I know, someone from the Wind God sect was injured by this kid too. Shouldn't you be looking for him for revenge? Why do you seem so angry that I killed him? Ouyang Chuan's eyes flickered. He was filled with anger, but he could not vent it out. Sima Lianzhao killing Nie Tian was equivalent to killing him. However, now that things had come to this, was he really going to fight Sima Lianzhao to the death? Furthermore, he had the 7 evils Yin chill in his body. If he were to fight Sima Lianzhao to the death, he would most likely lose. Ouyang Chuan let out a roar. He was like a wild beast that had gone mad. Are you crazy? Sima Lianzhao glanced at Ouyang Chuan and actually ignored him. He turned around and was about to leave. Although he knew that Nie Tian had not died when he entered the 5th floor, he was extremely certain that he was definitely dead right now. He refused to believe that a peak overgod could take on his Azure Dragon's hand in a direct confrontation. The Azure Dragon's hand was one of the 3 great martial skills of the Blue Dragon sect. When Sima Lianzhao used it, it was enough to instantly kill a peak overgod. Nie Tian's true strength was only that of a peak overgod. It was impossible for him to survive. The crowd all looked at Ouyang Chuan and Sima Lianzhao at this moment. They had no idea what was going on. However, a voice rang out from behind Sima Lianzhao the moment he turned around. Sect Master Ouyang, I'm not dead yet. A deep, cold voice rang out from the cave. The voice was not loud, but every single word was like a clap of thunder. Everyone's eyes trembled as their faces changed. They were extremely shocked. Nie Tian. Ouyang Chuan's eyes narrowed when he heard the voice, and he immediately cried out,